My wife secretly went on a 14-day trip with her work husband. When she got back, I asked one question that froze her. Do you know what illness he has? She ran straight to the doctor, but by then it was already too late. The sound of her suitcase wheels on our driveway cut through the November air like a blade through silk, smooth, inevitable, final. I watched from the kitchen window, coffee growing cold in my hands, as my wife of 12 years stepped out of the Uber with the kind of glow people get from expensive vacations and expensive lies. 14 days, 2 full weeks she'd been gone on what she called a critical work retreat to some resort in the Bahamas. A retreat so critical, apparently, that spouses weren't invited. So critical that her phone had been conveniently unreachable for hours at a time. So critical that when I'd called the company's main line to leave a message, the receptionist had paused just a fraction of a second too long before saying she'd pass it along. That pause told me everything. But I said nothing. Not when she left, not during her absence, and not now as she walked up our front steps with that particular lightness in her step that guilt tries to disguise as happiness. The door opened. James, God, I missed you. Rachel looked radiant. Her skin had that sun-kissed bronze that doesn't come from sitting in conference rooms. Her eyes were bright, rested, alive in a way they hadn't been in months, maybe years. She wore a new linen dress, white and breezy, the kind of thing you buy on vacation when you're trying to become a different version of yourself. She dropped her bags and moved toward me for an embrace. I hugged her back, felt her arms around me, smelled the unfamiliar perfume mixing with sunscreen and something else. Something that made my stomach turn. How was it? I asked, keeping my voice level, almost disinterested. Exhausting, she said, pulling back with a performative sigh. Back-to-back sessions, networking dinners every night. I barely had time to breathe, but productive, really productive. I nodded slowly, took a sip of cold coffee, watched her watching me. She was good. I'd give her that. 12 years of marriage had taught her how to read my moods, how to calibrate her lies to match my temperature. But she didn't know what I knew. Couldn't know that I'd spent the last 14 days becoming a different person myself. The kind of person who checks phone records, who calls in favors, who sits in parking lots outside office buildings waiting for the truth to show its face. That's great, Rach, really great. I set down my mug. You must be tired. Why don't you shower, unpack? I'll make us lunch. Relief flickered across her face. You're the best. I'm disgusting from the flight. She grabbed her suitcase and headed upstairs. I listened to the familiar sounds of her moving through our house. The bedroom door opening, the suitcase being heaved onto the bed, the bathroom door closing, the shower starting. All of it so normal, so mundane, like the last 2 weeks had been exactly what she said they were. I pulled out my phone and looked at the photo again. The one Marcus had sent me. Marcus, her colleague, her work husband, the man she'd been texting at midnight for the past 6 months with messages that started as jokes and evolved into something else entirely. Marcus with his easy smile and his CrossFit body and his habit of putting his hand on the small of my wife's back during office parties. In the photo, they were at a beachside restaurant. Rachel was laughing at something he'd said, her hand on his forearm, her wedding ring catching the sunset light like a small, bitter joke. They looked happy. They looked like a couple. They looked like people who had forgotten that other people existed. Marcus had sent it to me by accident. A group text meant for his college buddies that included my number because we'd once been friends too, back before I understood what he was. The message that followed, wrong chat, man, sorry, came 3 minutes later. Long enough for me to screenshot everything, long enough for the truth to burn itself into my retinas. I deleted the photo and put my phone away. Upstairs, the shower stopped. I heard Rachel humming, actually humming, as she dried off, as she wrapped herself in the towel I'd washed and folded last Tuesday, while she was taking sunset walks with someone else. 40 minutes later, she came downstairs in yoga pants in one of my old college sweatshirts, her wet hair twisted into a bun. She looked younger, softer, like the woman I'd married. For a moment, just at a moment, I felt the muscle memory of love, the old instinct to protect her, to believe in her, to make excuses for the things that didn't add up. Then she smiled at me, and I remembered. Grilled cheese? I asked, already pulling out the bread. Perfect. She sat at the kitchen island, pulled out her phone, started scrolling. Oh my God, I have so many emails. They really worked us to the bone. I buttered the bread, laid cheese on sourdough, tried to keep my hand steady. Did Marcus survive? I know he was worried about the presentation. I said his name casually, like it was nothing, like I didn't know what I knew. Rachel glanced up, and for just a fraction of a second, something flickered in her eyes. Fear, guilt, recognition that we were about to cross into territory we couldn't come back from. Marcus, she said, and her voice was almost perfect. Almost. Yeah, he did great. You know him, always prepared. I do know him, I agreed, flipping the sandwich. That's why I was surprised when I found out. Found out what? She was still scrolling, but her thumb had stopped moving. This was the moment, the cliff edge, the point where our marriage would either bend or break. I plated her sandwich, cut it diagonally the way she liked, set it in front of her with a napkin and a pickle spear. Then I leaned against the counter, crossed my arms, and asked the question I'd been rehearsing for 6 days. Do you know what illness he has? The color drained from her face like water from a tub. The phone slipped from her hand, clattered on the marble countertop. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. She looked at me like I'd just spoken in a foreign language, like the words needed time to translate into something her brain could process. What? It came out as barely a whisper. Marcus, I kept my voice calm, almost clinical. The illness, I'm assuming he told you, given how much time you spent together these past 2 weeks. Her hand went to her throat, an unconscious gesture of panic. James, what are you talking about? It's serious, Rachel, the kind of thing that doesn't go away, the kind of thing that spreads if you're not careful. I let that hang in the air between us, watched it sink in. The kind of thing you'd want to get checked out. Soon. Like today, soon. She stood up so fast the bar stool scraped against the floor. What illness? James, what the hell are you talking about? I didn't answer, just looked at her with the kind of steady gaze that said everything and nothing, that confirmed her worst fears without giving her anything concrete to deny or defend against. I need to. She grabbed her purse, her keys, her phone. I need to make a call. Doctor's office is probably open for another hour, I said helpfully. You might want to ask for a full panel. Given the circumstances. She stared at me like she'd never seen me before. Like I was a stranger wearing her husband's face. Then she turned and walked out the door, her sandwich untouched. Her suitcase still unpacked upstairs, her lie hanging in the air like smoke. I heard her car start, heard the tires squeal as she backed out too fast, heard the engine fade as she sped toward town, toward the clinic, toward whatever test she thought she needed to prove or disprove something I hadn't actually claimed. Only then did I sit down. Only then did I let my hands shake. Only then did I pick up my phone and look at the other photos Marcus had accidentally sent. The ones of them at the pool, at dinner, in a hotel lobby that definitely wasn't a conference center. And only then did I smile. Because there was no illness, no disease, no medical emergency. There was only truth, weaponized. Only fear, precisely deployed. Only the beginning of a revelation that would tear everything down and build something else in its place. I took a bite of my own sandwich and pulled out the folder I'd been keeping hidden in my desk drawer. Inside were phone records, credit card statements, screenshots of deleted texts I'd recovered from our cloud backup, a timeline I'd constructed with the methodical patience of someone who'd had 14 days to become very, very good at detective work. And underneath all of that, the real evidence, the thing that would matter when this was over. But not yet, not today. Today was about the fear, about letting Rachel's imagination do the work I couldn't, about planting a seed of doubt that would grow into a forest of paranoia. Today was about asking one question that would make her run toward the truth while I stayed here, calm and still, waiting for the moment when everything would finally come into the light. I heard my phone buzz, a text from Rachel. At clinic, what illness? What illness? I set the phone face down on the counter and finished my lunch. Outside, November rain began to fall, washing the driveway clean of the tracks her suitcase had made. Inside, I sat in the silence of our house, our home that we'd built together, that held 12 years of memories and promises and lies. And I waited. Because this wasn't about revenge. Not really. This was about justice, about truth, about the moment when someone who thought they'd gotten away with something realizes that the ground beneath them has been slowly, carefully, methodically removed. And all that's left is the fall. My phone buzzed again, then again. Then it started ringing. I didn't answer. Let her wonder. Let her worry. Let her feel for just a few hours the kind of sick uncertainty I'd been living with since the moment that photo appeared on my screen. The rain fell harder, drumming against the windows like applause. And I sat in my kitchen, in my house, in my life that was about to become something entirely different, and I waited for Act 2 to begin. The rain had turned into a proper storm by the time Rachel's car pulled back into the driveway. 3 hours had passed. 3 hours during which my phone had collected 17 text messages, 9 missed calls, and 1 voicemail that I'd listened to twice. Not for information, but for the tremor in her voice. The way guilt makes people sound smaller, younger, desperately alone. I was in the living room when she came in, reading a book I wasn't actually reading, turning pages at intervals that suggested casual afternoon leisure rather than calculated psychological warfare. The lamp beside me cast warm light across the room, made everything look soft and safe and normal. A perfect stage for the performance we were about to give. She stood in the doorway, soaked through despite the short walk from car to house. Her hair hung in wet ropes around her face. Her eyes were red, from crying or rain, I couldn't tell. Maybe both. She looked fragile in a way that would have broken me a week ago. They ran every test they had, she said, her voice hollow. Blood work, cultures, everything. They couldn't find anything wrong with me. I looked up from my book, marked my place with a finger. That's good news. Is it? She took a step into the room. James, what illness? What were you talking about? I set the book aside slowly, deliberately. Let the silence stretch between us like a rubber band pulled to its breaking point. I think you should sit down, Rachel. I don't want to sit down. I want you to tell me what the hell is going on. Sit down. Something in my tone made her obey. She sank onto the couch across from me, pulling her wet cardigan tight around her body like armor. Water dripped from her clothes onto our hardwood floors, making small dark circles that spread and disappeared. There's no illness, I said quietly. The words hit her like a slap. What? Marcus doesn't have an illness. He's fine. Perfectly healthy as far as I know. Her face went through several expressions in rapid succession. Confusion, disrelief, anger, then back to confusion. Cycling through emotions like someone trying to find the right key for a lock. Then why? Because I needed you to run, I interrupted. I needed you to panic. I needed you to feel, even for just a few hours, the kind of fear that makes you question everything you thought you knew. She stood up. You're insane. You sent me to a clinic, made me think I'd been exposed to some disease, made me terrified that I'd... She stopped abruptly, realizing what she'd almost said. I leaned forward. That you'd what, Rachel? Caught something from Marcus? Because that's interesting phrasing. Why would you assume you'd caught something from Marcus specifically? Unless you were in a position to catch something from him. Unless you'd been close enough, intimate enough, for that to be a concern. The color that had returned to her face drained away again. We didn't. I haven't. Don't. I held up a hand. Please don't insult both of us by lying right now. We're past that. We're so far past that. She sank back onto the couch, and I watched her realize that this conversation wasn't going the way she'd expected. That she'd walked into something she couldn't charm or explain or rationalize her way out of. How long have you known? She whispered. Which part? That you and Marcus have been texting each other at midnight for 6 months? That you've been deleting messages from your phone but not from our cloud backup? That the work retreat was actually a couple's package at the Azure Bay Resort that he booked using his personal credit card? I paused. Or that you've been lying to my face every single day, asking me about my day, kissing me goodnight, making plans for our anniversary, while you were planning something entirely different with someone else? Each question landed like a stone in still water, sending ripples across her face. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. Finally, I can explain. I don't want you to explain. I stood up, walked to the window, watched rain run down the glass. Explanations are for misunderstandings. This wasn't a misunderstanding, Rachel. This was a choice, dozens of choices, actually. Every text, every deleted message, every lie about working late or going to the gym or needing space, every single one was a choice you made to betray me. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. Her voice was small, breaking. It evolved. We were friends. We worked together every day. And he understood things about me that I what? I turned from the window. That I didn't understand, that I failed to provide? Go ahead, Rachel. Tell me how this is somehow my fault. That's not what I meant. Then what did you mean? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you got bored or restless or whatever it is people get when they decide that their marriage vows were more like marriage suggestions. And instead of talking to me, instead of fighting for us, I gestured vaguely toward her, toward the space where our marriage used to be. You just found someone easier. She was crying now, proper tears streaming down her face, mixing with the rainwater. I'm sorry, God, James, I'm so sorry. It was stupid and selfish, and I never meant to hurt you. But you did hurt me. You are hurting me. Every second you sit there trying to make yourself feel better with apologies that don't mean anything, you're hurting me. I walked to the bookshelf where I'd hidden the folder, pulled it out, set it on the coffee table between us with a sound like a judge's gavel. This is 6 months of evidence. Phone records, credit card statements, security footage from the office parking garage, showing you leaving together at midnight on dates when you told me you were working late. Screenshots of texts where you called him baby and where he told you what he wanted to do to you when you were finally alone. Rachel stared at the folder like it was a bomb. You've been spying on me? I've been protecting myself, I corrected. There's a difference. You created this situation and I responded to it. Don't try to make me the villain in your story. She reached for the folder with a shaking hand, opened it, started flipping through pages. I watched her face as she saw it all laid out. The evidence of her betrayal organized chronologically, highlighted, annotated. I'd spent 14 days building this case with the thoroughness of a prosecutor preparing for trial. What are you going to do with this? She asked finally. That depends. On what? On whether you're capable of telling me the truth. The whole truth. Not the edited version you have been rehearsing on the drive home. Not the sanitized story where you minimize what happened and maximize my supposed failures as a husband. The actual, complete truth about you and Marcus. She closed the folder, pressed her palms against it like she could somehow erase what was inside. We slept together. The words hung in the air. Even though had known for days really, hearing her say it out loud was different. It made it real in a way that evidence never could. It transformed abstract betrayal into concrete fact. When? My voice sounded distant to my own ears. The first time was in July, after the company summer party. We'd both been drinking, and he drove me home because you were out of town, and I invited him in for coffee, and I don't need the play-by-play. How many times total? She hesitated. I don't know, maybe 10, 12. And the Bahamas trip? We were together the whole time. It wasn't a work retreat. There was no conference. We wanted time alone, away from everything. I nodded slowly, absorbing this. Did you use our savings account to pay for your half of the trip? The account we've been building for the down payment on a bigger house? Her silence was answer enough. Okay. I walked back to my chair, sat down, picked up my book. You should pack a bag. What? A bag, Rachel. Clothes, toiletries, whatever you need for a few days. I think it's best if you stay somewhere else for a while. James, please. This isn't negotiable. You violated our marriage. You lied to me for 6 months. You used our money to fund your affair. And now you need to leave. We'll figure out the rest later. But right now, tonight, I need you to not be here. She started sobbing, deep, gasping sobs that shook her whole body. I don't have anywhere to go. You have parents 20 minutes away. You have friends. You have Marcus. I opened my book to a random page. You'll figure it out. You're good at figuring things out behind my back. I love you, she said desperately. I still love you, James. This thing with Marcus, it doesn't change how I feel about you. I looked at her over the top of my book, and maybe she saw something in my face that scared her, because she flinched. Rachel, you spent the last 14 days in paradise with another man. You swam in the ocean with him, slept in his arms, woke up next to him, planned a future with him. And during all of that, how many times did you call me? Three 5-minute conversations where you fed me lies about conference schedules and networking events. So don't tell me you love me. Don't cheapen that word more than you already have. She sat there for another minute, maybe hoping I'd change my mind. Maybe trying to find some combination of words that would fix this. But there was no combination, no magic spell, no way back to the morning when she'd walked in glowing with sun and secrets. Finally, she stood up and walked upstairs. I listened to her moving through our bedroom, opening drawers, pulling clothes from hangers. The sounds of a life being dismantled, one article of clothing at a time. 20 minutes later, she came down with a duffel bag and her laptop case. She paused at the door, looked back at me. What happens now? Now you leave, and tomorrow we start figuring out what the truth costs. I really am sorry, James. I know you are. That's the saddest part of all of this. I genuinely believe you're sorry. You're just not sorry enough to have not done it in the first place. She opened her mouth like she wanted to say something else, then thought better of it. The door closed behind her with a soft click. Her car started. The engine faded into the distance. And then I was alone. I set down the book I hadn't been reading and walked to the window. The storm had passed, leaving everything wet and clean and new. The street lights reflected in puddles, making the world look like it was floating. My phone buzzed. A text from Rachel. I'm at my parents', please don't hate me. I turned the phone face down and went to the kitchen. Opened the fridge, pulled out the leftover grilled cheese from lunch, ate it cold standing over the sink. It tasted like nothing. Tomorrow would be hard. Tomorrow would be conversations with lawyers and accountants, decisions about who got what, divisions of a life we'd built together. Tomorrow would be telling our friends, our families, watching the shock and sympathy and judgment ripple through our social circle. But tonight was just me in the house in the rain-washed silence. I cleaned up the kitchen, turned off the lights, went upstairs to our bedroom. Her closet was half empty now, gaps where her favorite dresses had hung. The bathroom counter had spaces where her products used to be. The whole room felt larger, emptier, like a museum of a marriage. I lay in bed, our bed, and stared at the ceiling, and for the first time in 14 days, I felt the weight of what I'd set in motion. The question about the illness had been calculated cruelty, psychological warfare designed to make her panic, to make her feel a fraction of the fear and betrayal I'd been living with. It had worked perfectly, maybe too perfectly, but this wasn't over, not even close, because I'd learned something important over the past 2 weeks, something about myself I hadn't known before. I was very, very good at patience, at planning, at playing a long game that no one else could see until it was too late. And Rachel had given me 6 months of material to work with, 6 months of lies and betrayals and choices that could be documented, proven, used. Not for revenge. I had to keep telling myself that. This wasn't about revenge. This was about making sure that when this was over, when the divorce was final and the property divided and the stories told, the truth would be clear. Not her version of the truth, where she'd somehow paint herself as the victim of a distant husband. Not Marcus's version, where he was just a nice guy who fell in love with someone who happened to be married. The actual truth, clean and sharp and undeniable. I closed my eyes and thought about the folder, about the evidence I'd gathered, about the pieces I'd carefully arranged. But there was more, so much more that she didn't know yet. Information I'd uncovered that would change everything. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Rachel, then another. I could imagine what they said. More apologies, more explanations, more attempts to manage the narrative. I didn't look. Not tonight. Tonight was for sleeping in a bed that felt too big, in a house that felt too quiet, in a life that would never be the same. Tomorrow we'd start the next phase. Tomorrow, she'd learn what that question about the illness really meant. Tomorrow, the truth would continue its slow, inevitable march into the light. But for now, I just lay there in the dark, listening to the sound of my own breathing, feeling the weight of my wedding ring on my finger, wondering when exactly I'd take it off. Not yet. Not until this was finished. The ring was evidence too, in its way. Evidence of promises made and broken, of a contract violated, of trust weaponized and destroyed. I twisted it around my finger in the darkness, feeling the familiar groove it had worn into my skin over 12 years. Soon, I thought, soon. Outside, a car passed, its headlights sweeping across the ceiling. Then darkness again, then silence. And in that silence, I began planning tomorrow. Morning came too early and too bright. Sunlight streaming through windows I'd forgotten to close, turning our bedroom into a gallery of empty spaces. I woke disoriented, reaching automatically for Rachel before remembering. The sheets on her side were cold, undisturbed, accusatory in their smoothness. I lay there for a moment, taking inventory of how I felt. Angry, yes. Hurt, definitely. But underneath those expected emotions was something else, something clearer and colder. Purpose. The kind of focused determination you get when you stop hoping things will fix themselves and start accepting that you're going to have to break them further before anything can heal. My phone showed 8 missed calls and 14 new messages, all from Rachel, except for one from a number I didn't recognize. I ignored them all and went downstairs to make coffee, moving through the morning routine with mechanical precision. Everything felt different now. The kitchen where I'd made her breakfast 1,000 times, the living room where we'd watched movies, the doorway where she'd stood dripping rainwater, and lies just 12 hours ago. The coffee was brewing when my phone rang again. This time it was a number I recognized. David Chen, my best friend since college, calling at 7:30 on a Sunday morning, which meant Rachel had already started working her side of the story. "You've talked to her," I said instead of hello. Jesus Christ, James. She called me at midnight sobbing, said you kicked her out, accused her of some affair, that you'd completely lost it. David's voice was careful, walking the tightrope of friendship. I told her I needed to hear your side before. "It's not an affair," I interrupted. "An affair implies secrecy and shame. What Rachel had with Marcus was more like a parallel relationship. 6 months, David. 6 months of texts and late nights and a 2-week vacation together while I thought she was at a work conference." Silence on the other end. Then, shit. "Yeah. Do you have proof? Because she's telling everyone you're paranoid, that you've been accusing her of things based on..." I have a 60-page dossier of proof. Phone records, credit card statements, hotel reservations, security footage, text messages she thought she'd deleted. I have a photo of them at a beachside restaurant in the Bahamas on a date when she was supposedly in a conference room in Orlando. I have receipts for romantic dinners charged to our joint account that she told me were client meetings. I poured coffee, watched it steam. I have enough proof to convince a jury, David. I definitely have enough to convince our friends. Another pause. What do you need? And that's why David had been my best friend for 15 years. No judgment, no wasted sympathy, just straight to the practical question. I need you to not take sides publicly yet. Let her tell her story. Let Marcus tell his. Let them think they're controlling the narrative. Why? Because people always tell more truth when they think they're getting away with lies. And I need to know exactly what story they're selling before I show everyone the receipts. David stopped. "This is really calculated, man. Are you okay?" "No," I said honestly, "I'm not okay. My wife spent the last 6 months building a life with someone else while I was here being faithful and trusting and stupid. But I will be okay eventually. And when I am, I want to be able to look back and know I handled this the right way. Not the angry way, Not the revenge way, the right way. The right way, David repeated slowly. And what way is that? The way where everyone knows exactly what happened, where she can't rewrite history or play the victim, where our friends and family understand that I didn't give up on our marriage. She did. Where if our kids ask about this someday, you don't have kids. Not yet, but we were trying. I took a sip of coffee, felt it burn. She was on fertility treatments, David. We've been trying for a year. All those doctor's appointments, all those hopes and disappointments. And the whole time, she was sleeping with Marcus. I heard him breathe out slowly. That's really dark, James. Truth usually is. We talked for a few more minutes about logistics. He'd come by later. We'd go through everything. He'd help me think through next steps. When we hung up, I felt marginally more human. One friend who knew the truth. One person who wouldn't look at me with pity or suspicion. My phone buzzed. Rachel again. Can we please talk? I know you're angry, but we need to discuss this like adults. I almost laughed. Like adults. As if she hadn't spent half a year acting like a teenager sneaking around behind her parents' back. But she was right about one thing. We did need to talk. Not for her reasons. For mine. I texted back. Come by at 2 p.m. Bring Marcus. The 3 dots appeared immediately, disappeared, appeared again. Then, why would I bring Marcus? Because this involves him, because I want everyone at the table, because I'm done with separate conversations and managed truths. 2 p.m., both of you. The dots appeared and disappeared several more times before she finally replied, okay. I spent the morning preparing. Not emotionally, there was no preparing for that, but practically. I cleared the dining room table, set out 3 chairs, laid out 3 copies of the folder I'd assembled. Made it look less like our home and more like a deposition room. Clinical, official, the kind of space where comfortable lies die under harsh fluorescent truth. At 1:30, David arrived with sandwiches I wouldn't eat and emotional support I desperately needed. He looked through the folder while I stared out the window, and I heard him swearing softly as he turned pages. James, this is really thorough. I had 14 days with nothing to do but think and investigate. The text messages, he said, holding up a printed page. Did you see this one from July 23rd? I had seen them all, including the one he was looking at, where Rachel told Marcus that I was safe but boring, and that being with him made her feel alive again. That one had been particularly hard to read at 3 in the morning while she was swimming in the Caribbean with the man who made her feel alive. I saw it, I said simply. And you still want to do this face to face? You could just file for divorce, let the lawyers handle everything. I could, but I need to see his face when he realizes I know everything. I need to watch them try to explain this while sitting in the house they betrayed. I stopped, trying to find the right words. I need to witness this, David, not as revenge, as closure, as confirmation that I'm not crazy for feeling betrayed, that what happened actually happened the way I think it did. He nodded slowly. I get it. I'll stay if you want backup. No, this needs to be just the 3 of us, but thank you. At exactly 2 o'clock, Rachel's car pulled up. She sat in the driver's seat for a long moment before getting out. No Marcus. She walked to the door alone, knocked softly even though she still had her keys, waited for me to let her in like a guest in her own home. She looked terrible. Red eyes, no makeup, hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. Part of me, the part that had loved her for 12 years, wanted to comfort her. The rest of me remembered why she looked this way. He's not coming, she said before I could ask. Marcus, he said this is between us, that he doesn't want to get in the middle of our marriage. I almost smiled at that. That's convenient. Getting in the middle of our marriage was fine when it involved Caribbean vacations and midnight texts. But now that there's consequences, he's suddenly principled. All about boundaries? He's scared, Rachel said quietly. You have to understand, James, he never meant for this to. I don't have to understand anything about what Marcus meant or didn't mean. But fine, he's not here. We'll do this with just us. I gestured to the dining room. Sit. She saw the folders laid out on the table and went pale. What is all this? Sit down. She sat, I took the chair across from her, the table between us like a demilitarized zone. For a moment, we just looked at each other. Husband and wife, stranger and stranger. Before we start, I said, I need you to understand something. Everything I'm about to show you, everything I know, I discovered on my own. I didn't hire a private investigator. I didn't hack your accounts. I just paid attention. I checked the phone records we both have access to. I looked at credit card statements for accounts we jointly own. I recovered texts from cloud backups we both use. Everything was right there, Rachel. You just assumed I'd never look. She was crying again, silent tears tracking down her face. I'm so sorry. Stop apologizing and start explaining. Start with July, the company summer party. You told me you got a ride home with Sarah from accounting. I lied. I know you lied. I want to hear you say what actually happened. I want to hear you tell the truth for once. She took a shaky breath. Marcus drove me home. We'd been flirting for weeks, maybe months. Nothing physical, just there was this tension between us. And that night we'd both been drinking, and he drove me home, and I invited him in. I told myself it was just coffee, just a nightcap, but I knew. Somewhere deep down, I knew what I was inviting. Go on. We kissed in the kitchen, right there where you make me breakfast. And then we went upstairs, to our bedroom, to our bed. She was sobbing now, the words coming in gasps. Afterwards, I told myself it was a mistake, that it would never happen again. But then he texted me the next day, and we met for lunch, and it kept happening. Once a week, sometimes more, hotels mostly. Sometimes his apartment when his roommate was traveling. Using money from our joint account. Yes. Money we were saving for a house. Yes. Money we were saving for the family we were trying to start. She flinched like I'd struck her. Yes. I opened the first folder, slid it across the table to her. This is every text message between you and Marcus for the past 6 months. I've highlighted the ones where you discussed me, the ones where you complained about our marriage, the ones where you planned your future together. She looked at the folder like it might bite her. I can't read these. Yes, you can, because I had to read them. I had to sit in this house alone while you were in the Bahamas and read every single message where you told another man things you should have told me, where you shared intimacies with him that belonged to our marriage, where you built a whole separate relationship while I was here trusting you. James, please, read it, all of it. I want you to see what you did from the outside. I want you to understand that this wasn't a mistake or a moment of weakness. This was a sustained campaign of deception. This was you choosing over and over again to betray me. She opened the folder with shaking hands, started reading. I watched her face cycle through emotions, shame, regret, recognition, horror. Watched her see herself through my eyes, see her betrayal documented and highlighted and undeniable. There's more, I said when she was halfway through. I slid her the second folder. Credit card statements, hotel reservations, restaurant receipts, a financial record of your affair, paid for with our money. She looked at the numbers, the dates, the paper trail of her lies. I'll pay it back, every cent. I'll get a second job. This isn't about money. I pulled the third folder toward me, didn't open it yet. This is about truth, about making sure that when this is over, when we're divorced and divided and dealing with the wreckage, the record is clear. You didn't leave because I was a bad husband. You didn't cheat because I neglected you. You made choices, Rachel. Conscious, deliberate choices to lie and betray and destroy what we built. I know, she whispered. I know what I did. Do you? Because from where I'm sitting, I don't think you really understand the magnitude of this. You violated our marriage vows. You exposed me to health risks without my consent. You stole from our savings. You lied to our friends and family. You made me doubt my own sanity when I started suspecting something was wrong. You gaslit me, Rachel. For 6 months, you made me feel crazy for noticing that something was off. She was sobbing now, her whole body shaking. What do you want from me? I've apologized. I've admitted everything. What more can I do? I opened the third folder. Inside was a single document, a printout of an email Marcus had sent to a mutual friend, dated 3 weeks ago, detailing his relationship with my wife and his plans for their future together. Plans that included her leaving me, moving in with him, starting a life together. Plans she'd apparently agreed to. "Did you tell him you'd leave me?" I asked quietly. She looked at the email and something in her face crumpled. "We talked about it. We fantasized about it. But I was never going to actually, except you were in the Bahamas with him for 2 weeks, Rachel. 2 weeks that you could have used to tell me the truth, to end our marriage honestly, to give me the dignity of a choice. Instead, you came home, kissed me, told me you missed me, and acted like everything was normal. I was confused. I didn't know what I wanted. You knew exactly what you wanted. You wanted both. You wanted the security and history and home we'd built together, and you wanted the excitement and passion of something new. You wanted to have your cake and fuck it too." The vulgarity made her flinch, but I didn't care. The problem is that's not how life works. That's not how marriage works. You don't get to destroy something and then be surprised when it breaks. She sat there, surrounded by evidence of her betrayal, looking smaller and younger than I'd ever seen her. What happens now? I pulled out one more document from my jacket pocket, a petition for divorce that my lawyer had drawn up yesterday. I slid it across the table. "You're going to sign this. It's a no-fault divorce, which is more generous than you deserve. But I'm not interested in dragging this through courts. It splits our assets 50-50, which again is more than fair given that you stole from our savings to fund your affair. It includes a statement that you acknowledge the infidelity and waive any claim to alimony or spousal support." She stared at the document. "And if I don't sign, then I file for an at-fault divorce. I submit all of this evidence to the court. I subpoena Marcus, your colleagues, everyone who knew or suspected what was happening. I make this as public and painful as possible. I let a judge decide how to divide our assets, and I guarantee you it won't be 50-50. I lean forward. But more than that, Rachel, I tell everyone the truth, not your sanitized version where you were confused and made mistakes. The real truth, documented and proven. I let our friends and family see exactly who you are and what you did. That's blackmail. That's consequences. You want to move forward with Marcus? Fine. Sign the papers, and in 6 months you'll be free to do whatever you want. But you don't get to do it on my dime or with my reputation. You don't get to paint yourself as the victim of a bad marriage when you're the one who destroyed a good one." She picked up a pen with a shaking hand. "I really did love you. I still do." "Then you have a funny way of showing it." She signed. 4 places, her signature getting messier each time, her tears smudging the ink. When she was done, she pushed the papers back to me. "I'll be out of the house completely by next week," she said. "I'll just take my clothes and personal things. You can have everything else." "I don't want everything else. I want to split things fairly. This isn't about punishing you, Rachel. It's about ending this honestly." She stood up, looked around the dining room like she was seeing it for the last time. "For what it's worth, I really am sorry. You deserved better than this. Better than me." "Yeah," I said, "I did." She walked to the door, paused with her hand on the knob. "The question yesterday about the illness. There really isn't one." "No, go." "Then why?" "Because I needed you to feel what I felt when I found out. The fear, the uncertainty, the sick dread of knowing something terrible had happened and not knowing how bad it would be. I needed you to run to a doctor and beg for tests and sit in a waiting room imagining the worst. Because that's what I did, Rachel. When I found out about you and Marcus, I went to a clinic and got tested for every STD they offer because you'd been sleeping with me and him, and I had no idea what I'd been exposed to. I met her eyes. I wanted you to feel that, just for a few hours, just to understand." She paled. Were you? "I'm clean, negative for everything, but I had to live with that fear for a week while I waited for results. And you should know what that feels like. You should carry that weight, even if just for a moment." She nodded slowly, opened the door, walked out. This time I knew it was for the last time as my wife. Next time she'd come back, it would be to pack boxes, to sort through the debris of our life together, to figure out who got the coffee maker and who got the photos from our honeymoon. But that would be later. That would be the mechanical, practical end of things. This had been the emotional end, the moment where our marriage officially died, documented and divided and done. I sat alone at the dining room table, surrounded by folders of evidence, holding divorce papers with her signature still wet, and I felt nothing. Not relief, not satisfaction, not even grief, just emptiness. Just the hollow echo of what used to be. My phone buzzed. A text from David. How did it go? I looked around the room at the chair where Rachel had sat, at the folder she'd read, at the dissolution of 12 years reduced to signatures on legal documents. It's done, I typed back. Phase 1 complete. Because this wasn't over. Not really. The divorce papers were signed, yes, but there was still so much more she didn't know. Still so much more that would come to light in the days and weeks ahead. Still the truth I hadn't told her yet. The biggest truth of all. But not today. Today had been about confrontation and confession. Tomorrow would be about revelation. I gathered up the folders, locked the signed divorce petition in my desk, and went upstairs to bed. The house felt different now, not mine, not ours, just a space where two people used to live before one of them burned it all down. I lay in bed and stared at the ceiling and waited for sleep that wouldn't come. And in the silence, I thought about tomorrow and what came next and the final piece of the puzzle that Rachel didn't even know existed yet. Soon, I thought, soon she'll understand the real cost of what she's done. But not yet, not tonight. Tonight was for endings. Tomorrow would be for the truth. 3 days after Rachel signed the divorce papers, Marcus finally called me. I was in my home office, our former shared space, now just mine, sorting through tax documents and trying to figure out how to divide a life. When his name appeared on my phone screen, I let it ring 4 times before answering, each ring a small assertion of control. James, his voice was cautious, overly friendly in that way people get when they know they've done something unforgivable and are trying to pretend they haven't. Hey man, I've been meaning to reach out. Have you? I kept my voice flat, made it a statement instead of a question. Yeah, listen, I just wanted to, Rachel told me you guys are getting divorced, and I wanted to say I'm sorry, That really sucks. Marriage is hard. I almost admired the audacity of it, calling me to offer sympathy for the marriage he'd helped destroy, speaking about it like it was some natural disaster rather than a deliberate demolition. Is that why you called, Marcus? To tell me marriage is hard? A pause. I called because I think we should talk, in person, clear the air, We used to be friends. We were never friends. We were friendly. There's a difference. Friends don't sleep with each other's wives. Another pause, longer this time. Look, I know you're angry. I'm not angry. And as I said it, I realized it was true. The rage that had consumed me for weeks had burned itself out, leaving something colder and clearer in its place. Anger implies I'm still surprised by what happened. I'm past that now. Then why won't you meet with me? Let me explain. Explain what? The mechanics of how you seduced my wife? The rationale for why 6 months of lying was justified? The philosophy behind booking a romantic vacation with someone else's spouse? I spun my chair to face the window, watched a cardinal land on the fence outside. I already know the story, Marcus. Rachel told me everything. She told you her version. I think you should hear mine. Why would your version be any different? Because there are things she doesn't know. Things about why He stopped abruptly. Just meet me. 1 coffee. That's all I'm asking. Something in his tone caught my attention. A thread of desperation, of calculation. He wanted something specific from this meeting, needed to control some aspect of the narrative that Rachel hadn't given him access to. Fine, I said. Tomorrow, Java House on Main Street, 9 a.m. Thank you. Really, James, I appreciate... I hung up before he could finish. Appreciation from the man who'd betrayed me wasn't currency I was interested in accepting. That night I lay in bed, the same bed where this had all started, where Rachel had brought her lies and her guilt and her betrayal, and thought about what Marcus might want. What information he was scared I had, or desperate to share, or hoping to learn. The call hadn't been about clearing the air or offering apologies. It had been reconnaissance, a way to gauge what I knew, what Rachel had told me, where the fault lines in their story might be. Which meant there were fault lines, which meant the story I'd heard from Rachel wasn't complete. I fell asleep thinking about what those gaps might contain. The next morning I arrived at Java House 15 minutes early, ordered black coffee I didn't drink, and took a table by the window where I could watch Marcus arrive. Control of space, control of timing, control of the performance. Small things that added up to power. He walked in at exactly 9, dressed in the expensive casual way of men who work in tech. Designer jeans, tasteful sweater. Watch that cost more than most people's monthly rent. He looked tired. Good, he should be tired. He'd spent the last 6 months juggling 2 lives, and now one of them had collapsed. James, he extended his hand as he approached. I looked at it, left it hanging there in the air between us, watched him slowly retract it. Sit down, Marcus. He sat, ordered coffee from a passing server, arranged his face into an expression of somber concern. I'm glad you agreed to meet. Let's skip the pretense. You didn't call to apologize or explain. You called because you're worried about something. So tell me what it is and we can both get on with our mornings. He blinked, the mask slipping for just a moment. I'm not worried. I just thought we should clear the air. You already said that on the phone. It wasn't convincing then either. I leaned back, crossed my arms. Rachel signed divorce papers 3 days ago. She's moving in with you next week. You won, Marcus. You got what you wanted. So why do you look like someone who lost? His coffee arrived. He added cream, stirred it, used the ritual to avoid answering. Finally, did Rachel tell you why it started between us? She said you'd been flirting for months, that it escalated at the summer party. That's true, but it's not. He took a breath. James, your marriage was already over when I came into the picture. I felt a flash of heat behind my eyes, the ember of anger reigniting. Our marriage was fine. Was it? Because Rachel told me she'd been unhappy for years, that you were distant, disconnected, that you'd stopped really seeing her. She said she felt invisible in her own life. And you believed her? I leaned forward. Or did you just like having permission to pursue a married woman? I believed her because it's true. He met my eyes with something that looked like genuine conviction. I'm not the villain here, James. I fell in love with someone who was already leaving you emotionally. I just gave her somewhere to go. The audacity of it took my breath away. You're rewriting history to make yourself feel better. Rachel and I had problems. Every long-term marriage does, but we were working on them. Or at least I thought we were, until I found out she was working on you instead. She said you'd frame it that way, that you'd make her the betrayer when you were the one who checked out of the marriage years ago. I stared at him, this man who'd shared my wife's bed and apparently her revisionist history. Is that what she told you? That I'm the reason for her affair? Not the reason, but part of it. James, I'm not trying to hurt you more than you're already hurt. I'm trying to help you understand that this didn't happen in a vacuum. Rachel didn't wake up one day and decide to destroy her marriage for fun. She was lonely, she was drowning, and You what? Saved her? I laughed, a bitter sound that made the couple at the next table glance over. You're a hero in your own story, Marcus. The knight who rescued the sad, neglected wife from her terrible husband. It's a nice narrative, clean, simple, makes you feel good about fucking someone else's spouse. He flinched at the language. I didn't plan for this to happen. No one ever does, but it did happen. And you participated in it, and now you're trying to sell me a story where I'm somehow partially responsible for my wife's infidelity. I pulled out my phone, opened the photo album I'd created specifically for this meeting. Let me show you something. I turned the phone to face him. On the screen was a text message thread between Rachel and me dated from May through November, the entire duration of her affair. Messages where I asked about her day, suggested date nights, Sent her funny memes, told her I loved her. Messages where she responded with one-word answers, declined invitations, said she was too tired or too busy or too stressed. This is what disconnected looks like in our marriage, Marcus. Me trying and her pulling away. Me suggesting therapy and her saying we didn't need it. Me planning a 20th anniversary trip. We got married at 22, so year 12 was big for us, and her saying she couldn't get time off work. I swiped to another screenshot. Except she could get time off work. She just wanted to spend it with you instead. He looked at the messages and something flickered across his face. Doubt, maybe, or recognition. Rachel told you what she needed you to hear to make herself the victim, I continued. She painted our marriage as dead so you wouldn't feel guilty about dancing on its grave. But look at those texts, Marcus. Look at me trying and her lying. And tell me again how I'm the one who checked out. People can be lonely even in relationships where the other person is trying, he said, but his voice had lost its certainty. Sometimes trying isn't enough. You're right. Sometimes it's not. But you know what would have been enough? Her telling me the truth. Her saying she was unhappy, that we needed to change something, that she was considering leaving. That would have been enough. Instead, she lied, and you helped her, and now you're here trying to make me complicit in my own betrayal. He set down his coffee cup with a clink that sounded too loud. Why did you really agree to meet me? Because I wanted to see if you'd tell me the truth about something. And I leaned forward. Rachel said this started in July, at the summer party. But that's not true, is it? His face went very still. What do you mean? I mean, I've seen the phone records, Marcus. Texts between you and her going back to February. Hundreds of them. Increasingly intimate. Increasingly inappropriate. The July party wasn't the beginning. It was just when the emotional affair became physical. He looked away, jaw clenching. That's semantics. No, it's honesty, or the lack of it. You and Rachel have been lying so long you've started believing your own story. The poor, lonely wife, the noble other man, the distant husband. But the evidence doesn't support that narrative. The evidence showed two people who actively pursued an affair, who made hundreds of conscious choices to betray a marriage, who lied not just to me, but to everyone around them. What do you want from me? He sounded tired suddenly, defeated. An apology? Permission? For me to admit I'm a terrible person? I want you to stop pretending you're not. I slid a folder across the table, one I'd prepared specifically for him. This is a copy of everything I showed Rachel. Phone records, credit card statements, text messages, photos, your entire affair, documented. I gave Rachel the courtesy of seeing it first. Now you get the same. He opened the folder slowly, started reading. I watched the blood drain from his face as he turned pages, as he saw his relationship with my wife laid out in stark black and white, evidence he'd probably convinced himself didn't exist. Why are you showing me this? He asked without looking up. Because I want you to understand something. This doesn't end with divorce papers and moving trucks. This ends when I decide it ends. And right now, I haven't decided yet. He looked up sharply. What does that mean? It means I have choices, Marcus. I can file an at-fault divorce and make all of this public record. I can share these documents with your employer. I'm sure they'd be interested to know their employees are using company time and resources for extramarital affairs. I can tell your parents, your friends, anyone who'll listen about what kind of man you really are. You're threatening me. I'm explaining consequences. You made choices. Those choices have implications beyond just getting to sleep with my wife. And I'm the one who gets to decide what those implications are. He closed the folder, pushed it away like it might contaminate him. Rachel said you were being vindictive. I didn't believe her, but maybe she was right. Vindictive would be ruining your life because you ruined mine. What I'm doing is giving you the same choice I gave Rachel. Cooperate with an honest dissolution of this mess, or watch me make it as painful as possible. I pulled the folder back toward me. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to give me a full written statement about your relationship with Rachel. Dates, locations, the truth about when it started and how it developed. Every relevant detail. Why would I do that? Because if you don't, I'll subpoena you for the divorce proceedings. I'll put you on a witness stand and make you answer these questions in front of a judge and court reporter. Your name will be in public records forever as the man who broke up a 12-year marriage. Or you can write it down privately. Give me the closure of knowing the complete truth, and we can all move forward quietly. He stared at me like he was seeing me for the first time. You've really thought this through. I've had a lot of time to think. 14 days alone while you and Rachel were in paradise. Weeks before that, when I started suspecting something was wrong. Hours and hours to sit with betrayal and decide how to respond to it. I stood up, left money on the table for my untouched coffee. You have until Friday to email me that statement. After that, I file the at-fault divorce and let the courts handle everything. And if I send you the statement, then what? Then we're done. You get Rachel, I get the truth, and we never have to speak again. I walked toward the door, then stopped and turned back. One more thing, Marcus. That story about Rachel being lonely and invisible, you might want to ask yourself why she told you that. Because in my experience, people who cheat don't usually start with, "My marriage is perfect." They start with stories that justify what they're already planning to do. She told you what you needed to hear to make yourself feel better about pursuing her, and you believed it because you wanted to. I left him sitting there with the folder and the truth and the slowly dawning realization that maybe, just maybe, he'd been played as much as I had. The email arrived Thursday night, 30 hours before my deadline. Subject line, Statement, Marcus Chen. No text in the body, just an attached document. I poured myself a whiskey, the expensive bottle Rachel and I had been saving for a special occasion, because what occasion was more special than the end of a marriage? And opened the attachment. It was 18 pages, single-spaced, exhaustively detailed. Marcus had done exactly what I'd asked, documented everything with the thoroughness of someone who understood that half-truths would only make things worse. He'd started with their first private lunch in February, detailed the progression of texts and meetings, admitted to the emotional affair that had preceded the physical one. He'd included things Rachel hadn't told me. Weekends when she'd said she was visiting her sister, but was actually with him. Late nights at the office that were really hotel rooms downtown. Lies upon lies, upon lies. But it was the ending that stopped me cold. "I want to be clear about something," Marcus had written. "Rachel told me your marriage was over. She said you'd grown apart, that divorce was inevitable, that she was just waiting for the right time to tell you. She said you hadn't been intimate in over a year, that you'd stopped trying, that you'd essentially become roommates. I believed her because I wanted to believe her, because it made what we were doing feel less like destruction and more like inevitability. But after meeting with you, after seeing those text messages where you were clearly still trying, still invested in your marriage, I have to acknowledge that I may have been lied to. Not about everything. I do believe Rachel was unhappy, but about the degree of that unhappiness and about whether your marriage was truly beyond repair. I'm not writing this to excuse my behavior. What I did was wrong regardless of Rachel's honesty or lack thereof. But I think you deserve to know that the woman you were married to may have been telling both of us different versions of the truth. She told you she was at conferences and work events. She told me you didn't care where she was, and both stories made sense in isolation. But together they reveal someone who was managing two narratives simultaneously. I don't know what that means for her, for us, for any of this, but I wanted you to have all the information. Not because I think it changes anything. Your marriage is still over, and that's largely my fault. But because you asked for the complete truth, and this is part of it. I'm sorry, James, for all of it, but especially for not asking harder questions about what I was really participating in. I wanted to believe I was saving someone. I'm starting to think I was just convenient. I read it 3 times, each pass revealing new layers of complexity I wasn't ready to process. Rachel had lied to both of us, had crafted separate realities for her husband and her lover, had managed contradictions that should have been impossible, had played us against each other without either of us knowing there was a game. The manipulation was breathtaking in its scope, the calculated nature of it, The way she'd made me doubt myself while making Marcus feel like a hero. The way she'd kept us both believing our own versions of reality while she lived in a third space altogether. My phone buzzed, a text from Rachel. "Can we talk? I need to get some things from the house this weekend." I looked at her message, thought about Marcus's statement, thought about the lies layered on lies, layered on more lies. And I realized this wasn't over, not even close, because there was one more truth I hadn't shared yet, one more piece of evidence that would change everything. The biggest revelation of all, the thing I'd been saving for exactly the right moment. And that moment, I decided, was now. I texted back, "Come by Saturday at 10 a.m., bring boxes for your things. And Rachel, bring your birth control pills." The three dots appeared immediately, then stopped, then appeared again. Finally, why? "You'll see," I typed. "Saturday at 10, don't be late." I sent it, turned off my phone, and sat in the darkness of my office with Marcus's confession and my whiskey and the knowledge that in 2 days everything would change again. Because Rachel didn't know that I knew. Didn't know that while she'd been lying to me about her affair, she'd been lying about something else too. Something bigger. Something that would reframe everything that had happened and everything that was about to happen. Saturday at 10 a.m., the final truth would come out, and then, finally, this would really be over. I raised my glass to the empty room, to the ghost of my marriage, to the man I'd been before all of this started. Phase 2, I said to no one. Complete. Then I drank and waited for Saturday and the reckoning that was coming. Saturday morning arrived wrapped in fog, the kind of gray November weather that makes everything look muted and undefined. I woke at 6, made coffee I couldn't taste, and spent 4 hours preparing the house for what was coming. Not cleaning, though I did that too, but arranging, setting the stage, creating the precise environment for truth to land with maximum impact. The dining room table, scene of so many previous confrontations, held a single manila envelope. Nothing else. No folders this time, no stacks of evidence. Just one envelope sealed, waiting. At 9:50, Rachel's car pulled into the driveway. She sat there for a moment, engine running, probably gathering courage or rehearsing explanations or doing whatever it is people do when they know they're walking into something but don't know what. Finally, the engine cut off. The car door opened. She walked toward the house carrying a single empty bus like she was hoping this would be quick. I opened the door before she could knock. "James?" She looked better than she had at our last meeting. Hair styled, makeup applied, wearing clothes that fit properly instead of the grief-stricken casualness of before. She looked like someone who'd started to move on. "Thank you for letting me come by. You still have keys. You don't need permission to enter your own house." I stepped aside to let her pass. "Though I suppose it's not really yours anymore, is it?" She flinched but said nothing, just walked past me into the living room and set down her box. "I'll try to be quick. I know this is hard for both of us." "Is it hard for both of us?" I gestured toward the dining room. "Come sit down first, before you start packing." "James, I really just want to get my things and—" "Sit down, Rachel." The steel in my voice made her obey. We walked to the dining room together, this house we'd shared becoming a museum of our ending. She saw the envelope on the table, looked at it with obvious wariness. "What's that?" "That's why I asked you to bring your birth control pills. Did you bring them?" She pulled a small pharmacy bag from her purse, set it on the table next to the envelope. "I don't understand what this is about." I sat down across from her, the table between us for what I knew would be the last time. "How long have you been taking those pills, Rachel?" "What? Why does that matter?" "Humor me. How long?" She frowned, calculating. 5 years? Maybe 6? Since we decided to start trying for kids and my doctor recommended I regulate my cycle first. "And you've been taking them consistently?" "Of course. Every day, same time. You know that you're the one who's been asking me about getting pregnant for the past year." Her voice took on a defensive edge. "Why are we talking about this?" I reached across the table and took the pharmacy bag, pulled out the pill packet, examined it slowly, deliberately. "These are from Dr. Morrison's office, right? Your gynecologist?" "Yes, James." "What?" "And she prescribed these to help regulate your cycle so we could conceive?" "Yes." Rachel was getting agitated now, her fingers drumming against the table. We've been over this 100 times. My hormones were irregular. The pills were supposed to help, but we were having trouble anyway, which is why we were considering fertility treatments. What does this have to do with anything? I set the pills down and slid the envelope across to her. Open it. She stared at the envelope like it might explode. What's in here? The truth, the last piece you don't know that I know. Open it. With shaking hands, she unsealed the envelope and pulled out the contents. Medical records, pharmacy receipts, email exchanges. She stared at the first page, and I watched understanding dawn slowly across her face. Watched the color drain from her cheeks as she realized what she was looking at. Where did you get these? Her voice was barely a whisper. I requested copies of your medical records. I'm still listed as your spouse and your emergency contact, which means I have legal access to your healthcare information. HIPAA is complicated that way. You can't hide medical information from a spouse who knows where to look. I leaned back in my chair. Those pills you've been taking? They're not to regulate your cycle, Rachel. They're standard oral contraceptives. Birth control, the kind that prevents pregnancy, the kind that makes it impossible to conceive. She was shaking her head, papers trembling in her hands. No, Dr. Morrison said these would help us get pregnant. She said, Dr. Morrison prescribed them 5 years ago as birth control. You told me she prescribed them to regulate your cycle. That was the first lie. I pointed to the next page in the stack. This is an email exchange between you and Dr. Morrison from 3 months ago. You asked her to continue the prescription. She reminded you that if you were still trying to conceive, you should stop taking them. You told her you'd think about it, but you didn't stop, did you? Rachel was openly crying now, tears streaming down her face, but I felt nothing. No sympathy, no regret. Just the cold satisfaction of watching the last lie crumble. This is an invoice from a pharmacy dated 2 weeks ago, while you were in the Bahamas with Marcus. You had your prescription refilled and shipped to his apartment. Not ours, his, because you didn't want me to see it, to ask questions about why you were still taking pills that were supposed to help us get pregnant, but were actually preventing it. James, please. For a year, Rachel, for an entire year, I thought we were trying to have a baby. I went to fertility appointments. I changed my diet, stopped drinking, took vitamins, did everything the doctors suggested to improve our chances. I held you while you cried about negative pregnancy tests. I reassured you that it would happen, that we just needed to be patient. And the entire fucking time, you were taking pills specifically designed to make sure it never happened. She was sobbing now, her whole body shaking. I was gonna stop. I was planning to stop. You just what? Needed to make sure you didn't accidentally get pregnant by your husband while you were sleeping with someone else? The words came out like acid. Or were you hoping to get pregnant by Marcus and pass it off as mine? Is that what the Bahamas trip was about? A 2-week window to conceive with him while I was here taking fertility supplements like an idiot? No, God, no, James, it wasn't like that. Then what was it like? Explain to me why you would let me believe we were struggling with infertility when you were actively preventing conception. Explain why you would put me through the emotional torture of thinking I might be the problem, that maybe we'd never have the family we both said we wanted. Explain why you would lie about something so fundamental, so intimate, so... I had to stop, had to breathe, had to resist the urge to scream. Explain it to me, Rachel. She was gulping air between sobs, trying to form words. I wasn't ready. I thought I was when we first started talking about it. But then when it became real, when it became something that was actually going to happen, I panicked. I realized I didn't want a baby. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But I knew you wanted one, and I didn't know how to tell you that I'd changed my mind. So instead of talking to me, instead of having an honest conversation about our future, you just lied. You let me think we had fertility problems. You went to doctor's appointments and nodded along while they discussed treatments, all while taking pills that made those treatments impossible. I know how it sounds. It sounds like you're a liar, Rachel. Not just about the affair, not just about Marcus, but about everything. Our entire marriage, our plans, our future, all of it was built on lies you told because you were too much of a coward to be honest about what you actually wanted. She wiped her face with shaking hands, leaving mascara streaks across her cheeks. What do you want me to say? I'm sorry, I've said that. I've apologized for everything. I want you to tell me the truth. For once, the actual, complete truth. I leaned forward. Did you ever want children with me? The silence stretched between us like a chasm. I don't know, she finally whispered. I thought I did. When we got married, when we were young and everything felt possible? Yes, I wanted kids. I wanted the whole thing. Spam my orange too. House, family, white picket fence. But somewhere along the way, I changed. I realized I liked our life the way it was. Liked having freedom and flexibility and not being tied down. And I didn't know how to tell you that without me leaving you? She nodded miserably. So you lied. You strung me along for years. Let me believe we were building towards something that you had no intention of actually doing. And when that lie got too complicated, when I started pushing for fertility treatments, you started an affair. Because it's easier to blow everything up than to have a difficult conversation. It wasn't calculated like that. It wasn't a plan. Of course it was a plan. Maybe not consciously, maybe not sitting down with a checklist, but your actions reveal intent, Rachel. You kept taking birth control while claiming to want a baby. That's deception. You pursued Marcus while acting like a devoted wife. That's betrayal. You booked a vacation with your lover using money we saved for our child's future. That's theft. Every single choice you made was designed to serve your desires while hiding them from me. I pulled another document from the envelope, one I'd been saving for this exact moment. This is a text message exchange between you and your sister from last April. You told her you weren't sure you wanted kids anymore. She asked if you'd talk to me about it. You said no, that you'd deal with it later. And when she suggested you should be honest with me, you said, I read directly from the screenshot. You said James would freak out. He's wanted kids since before we got married. It's easier to just keep pretending and figure it out eventually. Rachel stared at the message like she was seeing a ghost. You hacked my phone? I recovered deleted messages from our shared cloud backup, which you would know if you'd bothered to read the privacy settings. But that's not the point. The point is that you knew for at least 6 months, probably longer, that you didn't want what I wanted. And instead of being honest, instead of giving me the chance to decide if I wanted to stay in a marriage that would never include children, you just kept lying. Because I love you, she was shouting now, desperate. Because I didn't want to lose you, and I knew if I told you the truth, you'd leave. So I kept hoping I'd change my mind, that maybe I would wake up one day and want a baby as much as you did. But you didn't change your mind. You started sleeping with someone else instead. Those things aren't connected. Of course they're connected. You were trapped in a marriage where you'd lied about something fundamental, something you couldn't keep hiding forever. So you found an exit strategy. You started an affair, knowing it would eventually be discovered, knowing it would end things in a way that made me the injured party instead of you, the person who didn't want kids. You get to be the cheater who made a mistake instead of the wife who deliberately deceived her husband about their entire future. She shook her head violently. No, I didn't plan it like that. I didn't start things with Marcus to end our marriage. It just happened and it felt good and You what? You didn't think about the consequences? You didn't consider that actions have meanings? I stood up, too agitated to sit anymore. Here's what I think happened, Rachel. I think you realized years ago that you'd sold me a version of our future that you didn't actually want. I think you knew you couldn't maintain that lie forever. And I think when Marcus showed interest, when he offered you attention and excitement in a way out, you took it. Not because you love him, though maybe you do, I don't know, but because he represented escape from a truth you didn't want to tell. You're wrong. But her voice had no conviction. What am I? Then explain the timeline. Explain why your affair started within weeks of us beginning fertility treatments. Explain why you refilled your birth control prescription the same week we met with a reproductive endocrinologist. Explain why every step I took toward the family we supposedly both wanted, you took a corresponding step towards someone else. She had no answer, just sat there surrounded by evidence of her betrayals, plural, looking smaller and more lost than I'd ever seen her. I didn't marry Marcus to have kids, she said finally. I married you, for us. Why wasn't that enough? Because people change, Rachel. People want different things as they grow older. And when that happens, when you realize your goals don't align anymore, you talk about it. You don't lie about it. I sat back down, suddenly exhausted. If you'd told me 5 years ago that you didn't want children, I would have been disappointed. I'll be honest about that. But we could have talked it through, maybe found a compromise, or maybe decided we wanted different futures and parted as friends. Instead, you lied for 5 years, wasted a year of my life on fake fertility struggles, and had an affair that destroyed any possibility of us ending things amicably. What do you want from me? She was pleading now. You want me to say I'm a terrible person? Fine. I'm terrible. I'm a liar and a cheater, and I ruined everything good we had. Is that what you need to hear? I need you to understand that this isn't just about the affair, it's about the fundamental dishonesty that made the affair possible. You've been lying to me about who you are and what you want for most of our marriage. Marcus is just the most visible symptom of a much deeper disease. I pulled one more document from the envelope, the last one. This is an amendment to our divorce agreement. In addition to the 50-50 asset split, I'm requesting reimbursement for all fertility-related expenses from the past year. Doctor's visits, medications, treatments, everything we spent trying to conceive a child that you were actively preventing. It comes to about $12,000. She stared at the paper. You're billing me for trying to have a baby? I'm billing you for lying about trying to have a baby. There's a difference. She laughed, a broken sound. This is insane. This is vindictive and petty and... It's fair, I interrupted. You used our joint funds to pursue an affair. I'm asking you to reimburse me for funds I spent based on your lies. If you think that's unreasonable, we can let a judge decide. I'm sure they'll be very interested in hearing about how you defrauded your husband regarding fertility treatments while conducting an extramarital affair. She looked at me with something like hatred. You've really thought of everything, haven't you? Every angle, every punishment, every way to make me suffer. I've thought about the truth and the cost of hiding it. I stood up again, walked to the window, looked out at the fog-shrouded street. You can pack your things now. Take whatever you want. Furniture, photos, kitchen stuff. I don't care. I'll have my lawyer send over the amended agreement. You have a week to review it before I file. And if I don't sign, then we go to court. I present all of this to a judge. The affair, the lantas, the birth control, deception, all of it. And I let them decide how to divide our assets. But I promise you, Rachel, it won't be 50-50, not when fraud is involved. She gathered up the papers with shaking hands, stuffed them back into the envelope. I came here to pick up my things, not to be ambushed with. You ambushed me with 6 months of betrayal. I ambushed you with 1 morning of truth. I think I'm being generous with the ratio. She stood, grabbed her purse, started toward the stairs, then stopped and turned back. For what it's worth, I really did think I'd changed my mind about wanting kids. I really did think that maybe if we kept trying, I'd wake up one day and feel ready. I didn't set out to deceive you. But you did deceive me, and when you realized the deception was getting harder to maintain, you found someone else instead of finding honesty. That's the part you don't seem to understand, Rachel. The affair isn't the worst thing you did. The worst thing you did was trap me in a marriage built on lies and then blame me for not seeing through them. She opened her mouth, closed it, then turned and walked upstairs. I heard her moving through our bedroom, opening closets, dragging boxes across the floor. The sounds of a life being dismantled, one possession at a time. I sat back down at the dining room table and looked at the birth control pills she'd left behind. 28 small pills in a wheel, each one a day of deception, each one a choice to prioritize her comfort over our truth. An hour later, she came back downstairs with 3 boxes stacked precariously in her arms. I'll need to come back for the rest. There's too much for one trip. That's fine, just let me know when. I'll make sure I'm not here. She paused at the door, boxes balanced against her hip. Do you hate me? I considered the question. Thought about the woman I'd married 12 years ago, the promises we'd made, the life we'd built. Thought about the stranger she'd become, or maybe always was, hidden behind a performance of domesticity. No, I said finally. I don't hate you, Rachel. I hate what you did. I hate the lies and the betrayal and the cowardice. But you're just someone I used to know. Someone I thought I'd spend my life with. Someone who turned out to be completely different than I believed. Tears tracked down her face again. I never meant to hurt you. That's the tragedy of it. I actually believe that. I think you made 1,000 small choices without considering their cumulative impact. You lied without planning to lie. You cheated without meaning to cheat. You destroyed our marriage while thinking you were just managing it. I walked to the door, opened it for her. But intent doesn't erase impact. And the impact is that we're done, completely, irrevocably done. She walked out into the fog, loaded her boxes into her car, drove away. I watched her taillights disappear into the gray November morning, and I felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not grief, not even relief, just emptiness. Just the hollow echo of an ending that had been coming for longer than I'd realized. I went back inside, locked the door, and looked around at our house. Half-empty closets, gaps in the bookshelves, spaces where furniture used to be. A museum of subtraction, everything defined by what was missing rather than what remained. My phone buzzed. A text from David. How'd it go? I looked at the birth control pills still sitting on the dining room table, at the empty envelope, at the evidence of the last great lie. It went, I typed back, phase 3 complete. Because there was still one more phase, one more revelation, one more truth that needed to come to light before this could really, truly be over. But not today. Today was for sitting in the silence of an empty house, for processing the magnitude of deception, for beginning the long, slow work of figuring out who I was when I wasn't someone's husband anymore. Tomorrow I would start the final phase. Tomorrow I would take all this evidence, all this truth, all these carefully documented lies, and I would make sure the record was clear. Not for revenge, though I wouldn't pretend that wasn't part of it, but for clarity, for the future, for anyone who asked what happened to James and Rachel's marriage, so they'd know the real story instead of the sanitized version she'd inevitably tell. But for now, I just sat in the dining room of my half-empty house, in the fog-wrapped silence of a Saturday morning, and I let myself feel the full weight of what I'd lost and what I'd learned. The woman I'd loved had never really existed. The marriage I'd believed in had been built on lies. The future I'd planned would never happen. But at least now I knew. At least now the truth was out, sharp and clean and undeniable. And that, I told myself, had to be worth something. It had to be. The fog lifted by afternoon, leaving everything sharp-edged and too bright. I spent the rest of Saturday doing the mindless work of reorganization, moving furniture to fill the gaps Rachel had left, rearranging books on shelves, trying to make the house look less like a crime scene and more like a home that belonged to one person instead of two. Around 3, my phone started buzzing. Text messages, rapid fire, from numbers both familiar and forgotten. From Sarah, Rachel's coworker. Hey James, I just heard. I'm so sorry. If you need anything. From Mike, my college roommate hadn't talked to in months. Dude, what the hell? Rachel said you guys are splitting up? From Rachel's mother. James, honey, Rachel told us what's been happening. We need to talk. I stared at the messages, watched them multiply, 5, 7, 10, and realized what was happening. Rachel was telling people, spinning her narrative, getting ahead of the truth, shaping the story before I could. I opened Rachel's mother's text thread and typed, "Happy to talk. When works for you?" The response came immediately. Can you come for dinner tomorrow? 5 p.m.? I'll be there. I spent the rest of the evening watching my phone light up with concerned messages, sympathetic emojis, offers of support that felt hollow because nobody actually knew what they were supporting me through. They knew Rachel's version, whatever sanitized story she'd crafted about our marriage falling apart, about mutual incompatibility, about nobody being at fault. Nobody knew about Marcus, about the Bahamas, about 6 months of calculated deception, about birth control pills disguised as fertility treatments. Nobody knew the truth except me, Marcus, Rachel, and David. And tomorrow, I would start changing that. Sunday evening, I arrived at Rachel's parents' house at exactly 5 o'clock. The Tudor-style home in the suburbs where Rachel had grown up, where we'd had countless family dinners, where I'd asked her father for permission to marry her 12 years ago. I'd always felt welcome here, had thought of Richard and Patricia as second parents, had imagined our future children running through this same backyard. Now it just felt like enemy territory. Patricia answered the door with a tight smile and arms that wanted to hug but held back. "James, thank you for coming." Of course. I stepped inside, smelled pot roast and disappointment. "Thanks for having me." Richard appeared from the living room, looking older than I remembered. His face creased with the particular exhaustion of parents watching their child's marriage collapse. "James, come in, sit down. Can I get you a drink?" "Water's fine." We settled in the living room, me on the couch, them in matching armchairs, the coffee table between us like a negotiation table. The silence stretched uncomfortably until Patricia finally spoke. "Rachel told us you're filing for divorce." "That's correct." She said. Patricia glanced at her husband, drew strength from him. "She said you've been having problems for a while, that you'd grown apart, that you both decided it was best to end things before they got worse." I nodded slowly. "Is that what she said?" "Yes, and we want you to know, James, that we don't blame you. These things happen. Sometimes people change. Sometimes marriages don't work out. And, Patricia," I set down the water glass I hadn't drunk from. "I appreciate what you're trying to do, but that's not what happened." She blinked. "I'm sorry?" "Rachel and I didn't mutually decide to end our marriage. Rachel had a 6-month affair with a coworker named Marcus Chen. When I discovered it and confronted her with evidence, she signed divorce papers. That's what happened." The silence that followed was absolute. Patricia's face went white. Richard's jaw clenched so hard I could hear his teeth grind. "That's not," Patricia started. "Rachel said there was no one else. She said you were both just unhappy." I pulled out my phone, opened the photo album I'd prepared for exactly this conversation. "I'm going to show you something, and I need you to understand that I'm not doing this to hurt you. I'm doing it because you deserve to know the truth." I handed Patricia the phone. On the screen was the photo Marcus had accidentally sent. Rachel and him at the beachside restaurant, her hand on his arm, both of them looking like a couple. Patricia stared at it, her hand trembling. This was taken 2 weeks ago in the Bahamas, while Rachel told us she was at a work conference in Orlando. I swiped to the next photo. This is them at the resort pool, and this is a hotel room key card charged to Marcus's credit card for a 2-week stay. Patricia passed the phone to Richard with shaking hands. He looked at each photo with the methodical care of someone cataloging evidence, his face getting redder with each swipe. "How long have you known?" he asked finally. "I found out the day she got back from the trip. I'd suspected for a few weeks before that, but the accidental photo confirmed everything." "And you, what? You confronted her? She admitted it?" "Eventually, after I asked her one question that made her panic and run to a doctor's office, after I laid out 6 months of evidence, yes, she admitted everything." Patricia was crying now, quiet tears that spoke to deeper grief than just a failed marriage. "I don't understand. Rachel's not, she wouldn't, we raised her better than this." "I thought I knew her too," I said gently. "Turns out we were both wrong about who she really is." Richard set down the phone like it burned him. "Does Marcus work at her company?" "Yes, they've been colleagues for years. Friends first, then something more." I'll call her boss. This is workplace misconduct. They can't just, Richard, that's your choice, but I need you to know something else first." I took a breath. The affair isn't the only thing Rachel lied about. I told them about the birth control, about the year of fake fertility struggles, the treatments I'd undergone, the emotional torture of thinking we might never have children while she was actively preventing conception. I watched Patricia's face crumple as she understood the depth of her daughter's deception. "She told us you were both trying so hard," Patricia whispered. "She cried on my shoulder about negative pregnancy tests. I thought she wanted a baby as much as you did." So did I. Turns out we were both part of the same performance. Richard stood up abruptly, walked to the window, stood there with his back to us. His shoulders were shaking. "I need to call her. She needs to explain this. She won't be able to explain it in a way that makes sense. I've tried." I stood too, ready to leave now that the truth was out. "I know this is painful. I know you love your daughter and want to believe the best of her. But you asked me here to talk, and talking means telling you the truth, even when it's ugly." Patricia stood, hugged me with desperate strength. "I'm so sorry, James. I'm so sorry. If she'd told us, you would have told her to be honest with me. I know. But she didn't tell you because she knew what you'd say." I gently extracted myself from the hug. "I should go. This is a family matter now, and I'm not family anymore." "You'll always be family to us," Patricia said fiercely. "What Rachel did, that doesn't change how we feel about you. But it did change things, and we all knew it. The divorce would divide more than just assets. It would divide relationships, holidays, mutual friends. I would lose not just a wife, but a whole extended network of people I'd considered family." Richard walked me to the door, his face still red, his hands clenched into fists. "I'll talk to her. Make her understand what she's done, what she's thrown away. Don't do it for me. Do it because she needs to hear it from people who love her unconditionally. She needs to understand that love doesn't mean enabling lies." He gripped my shoulder. "You're a better man than I would be in your situation. I'm just trying to survive it with my integrity intact." I drove home through darkening streets, past houses lit with Sunday evening warmth, past families having normal dinners and normal conversations about normal problems. My phone started buzzing before I was halfway home. Rachel calling over and over, probably being confronted by her parents, probably panicking that her narrative was falling apart. I didn't answer. Let her panic. Let her explain herself to the people who raised her, who taught her right from wrong, who were now learning that she'd chosen wrong over and over again. When I got home, there were 7 missed calls from Rachel and 1 text. "How could you tell them? They're my parents." I texted back, "They asked for the truth. I gave it to them. That's what honesty looks like." Then I turned off my phone and sat in my living room, in my half-empty house, and I waited. Because this was just the beginning. Tomorrow I would talk to our mutual friends. Tuesday I would contact our extended families. By the end of the week, everyone who mattered would know the real story. Not Rachel's sanitized version, but the documented evidence truth. Not for revenge, for the record. So that when this was all over, when the divorce was final and the property divided and the last boxes moved, nobody would be able to say they didn't know what really happened. The truth was out now, spreading like light through fleas, burning off the comfortable lies people had been telling themselves about our marriage. And I was done protecting Rachel from the consequences of her choices, done enabling her deceptions by staying silent, done being the good guy who takes the high road while she rewrites history from the low one. My phone buzzed, a text from David. Rachel's mother called me, said you told them everything. "You okay?" "I'm fine," I typed back, just tired of lying by omission. "What's next?" I looked around my living room at the space Rachel used to occupy, at the life we used to share. "Next," I wrote, "I tell everyone else." And then, finally, I could start moving forward. Monday morning, I woke to 17 missed calls and 43 text messages. Word was spreading faster than I'd anticipated, the truth moving through our social network like a virus, infecting every shared friendship and mutual acquaintance. From Rachel, "Please stop telling people, you're ruining my life." From Marcus, "We need to talk. This is getting out of hand." From my mother, your father and I are on our way over. Don't make any decisions until we get there. From Sarah, Rachel's coworker. Is it true about Marcus? Everyone at the office is talking about it. I made coffee and started responding, methodically, honestly, letting the truth continue its spread. To Rachel, I'm not ruining your life. I'm telling the truth about what you did. There's a difference. To Marcus, there's nothing to talk about. You wanted my wife, you got her. Congratulations. To my mother, I'm fine, come whenever. Door's unlocked. To Sarah, it's true, 6 months. Ask HR to check the security footage from the parking garage if you want dates. The last one was calculated. Sarah was the office gossip, the woman who knew everyone's business and shared it with editorial flair. If I wanted the truth to spread through Rachel's workplace, Sarah was the vector. My parents arrived at 8, my mother sweeping in with a casserole and concern. My father with the quiet anger of a man whose son had been wronged. We sat at the kitchen table, my mother holding my hand, my father reading through the evidence folder with increasing fury, and I told them everything. That son of a bitch, my father said when I got to the part about Marcus. Give me his address. Dad, no, this isn't that kind of situation. The hell it isn't. He slept with your wife. That's exactly the kind of situation that requires legal resolution, not violence. I squeezed my mother's hand. I appreciate the sentiment, but I'm handling this the right way. My mother was crying, quiet tears that matched Patricia's from the night before. How are you so calm about this? If your father did something like this to me, I'm not calm, I'm focused. There's a difference. I pulled my hand back, wrapped it around my coffee mug instead. If I let myself feel everything right now, all the anger and hurt and betrayal, I'll fall apart. So I'm compartmentalizing, dealing with the practical aspects first, emotions later. That's not healthy, honey. Neither is staying in a marriage built on lies. I'm doing the best I can. They stayed for 2 hours, my mother reorganizing my kitchen cabinets because she needed something to do with her hands, my father making a list of lawyers I should consult and assets I should protect. Normal parent things, comforting in their mundanity. When they left, my father pulled me aside. You know we're proud of you, right? For handling this with dignity. A lot of men would have done something stupid by now. I still might, I said honestly. Ask me again in a month. He gripped my shoulder, that universal gesture of male affection, then left. I watched them drive away and felt the first real crack in my composure. Seeing their pain, their anger on my behalf, their helpless desire to fix something that was irreparably broken. It made it all more real somehow. I went back inside and checked my phone. More messages, more people finding out, expressing shock, offering support, asking questions. From Tom, our couple friend from book club. Dude, I had no idea. Rachel seemed so normal last Tuesday. From Amanda, Tom's wife. I'm so sorry, James. Do you want to come to dinner this week? From Rachel's cousin Jennifer. My mom told me what happened. I can't believe Rachel would do this. I'm so sorry. One by one, I watched our social network realign. People choosing sides, making judgments, deciding who to believe. And because I had evidence, documented, undeniable evidence, most of them were choosing me. It should have felt validating. Instead, it just felt exhausting. Around noon, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. James Rothstein? A woman's voice, professional, unfamiliar. Speaking. This is Jennifer Ward from Cascade Tech. I'm the HR director. I understand you have some information relevant to an internal investigation we're conducting. My heart rate picked up. What kind of investigation? I can't discuss details over the phone, but I'd like to meet with you this week if you're available. Bring any documentation you feel comfortable sharing. This is about Rachel and Marcus. A pause. I can neither confirm nor deny that, but yes, your information would be helpful. We scheduled a meeting for Wednesday. After hanging up, I sat with the implications. Sarah had worked fast, or maybe someone else had reported it. Either way, Rachel and Marcus's affair was now an official workplace matter. I should have felt satisfaction. Instead, I felt tired. My phone buzzed again. This time, Rachel. HR called me in for a meeting. What did you do? I stared at the message for a long moment before responding. I didn't do anything. I answered someone's question honestly. What happens next is a consequence of your choices, not my honesty. You're trying to get me fired. I'm trying to get divorced. If your affair violates company policy, that's between you and Cascade Tech. You're vindictive and cruel, and I can't believe I ever loved you. I read that last message 3 times, felt each word like a small knife. Then I typed, I loved you too, past tense. And the cruelty isn't in telling the truth, it's in making the truth necessary. I blocked her number after that, let her communicate through lawyers from now on. I was done being her emotional punching bag, done accepting abuse from someone who'd violated every promise she'd made to me. The afternoon brought more calls, friends of friends, Rachel's coworkers asking for clarification, my boss checking in to make sure I was okay. A steady stream of people wanting to know what happened, wanting to express sympathy, wanting to be part of the drama. I answered them all with the same calm recitation of facts. No embellishment, no editorial, just the documented truth over and over until it stopped sounding like my life and started sounding like a police report. By evening, I was done. Emotionally depleted, I turned off my phone, made myself dinner I didn't eat, and sat in front of the TV without turning it on. David showed up at 7 with beer and pizza and the gift of not asking how I was doing. Your mom called me, he said, settling onto my couch like he'd done 1,000 times before. Said you might need company. I'm fine. You're not fine, but you will be, eventually. He handed me a beer. Eat something, you look like shit. I took a bite of pizza, tasted cardboard. Rachel's HR called. They want to meet with me. You going? Wednesday. You know they could fire both of them, right? Workplace relationships are complicated legally, but if they were using company time or resources, I know. And you're okay with that? Rachel losing her job? I thought about it. Really thought about it. I don't want her to suffer. I don't want her life to be ruined, but I also can't protect her from the consequences of her choices anymore. If telling the truth means she faces professional repercussions, that's just what happens. David nodded slowly. You're handling this better than I would. No, I'm not. I'm just handling it differently. We sat in comfortable silence, eating pizza and drinking beer, the TV still dark, the house still half empty. It felt normal. It felt okay. It felt like maybe I would survive this after all. People are taking sides, David said eventually. Amanda and Tom invited you to dinner but didn't mention Rachel. Sarah stopped following Rachel on Instagram. Even the book club is splitting. Team James versus Team Rachel. There shouldn't be teams. This isn't a sport. It's human nature. People need to categorize things, decide who to support. And right now, with the evidence you've provided, most people are categorizing you as the victim and Rachel as the villain. She's not a villain. She's just... I stopped, tried to find the right words. She's just someone who made a lot of bad choices and is now facing the consequences. That's very mature of you. Fuck maturity. I'm angry and hurt and betrayed, but I'm also trying not to become someone I don't recognize. Trying not to let this turn me bitter or vindictive or cruel. Is that why you told everyone? To preserve your integrity? I told everyone because they deserved the truth. Because I was tired of Rachel controlling the narrative. Because I stopped, felt emotion rising in my throat. Because I needed people to know that I tried, that I was faithful and honest and did everything I was supposed to do. That when our marriage failed, it wasn't because I didn't fight for it. David didn't say anything. Just sat with me in the silence. Let me feel what I needed to feel without trying to fix it. You know what the worst part is? I said finally. I still love her, not the person she is, the person I thought she was. And I'm grieving someone who never really existed. How fucked up is that? Pretty fucked up, but also pretty normal. David grabbed another slice of pizza. You're mourning the death of your marriage and the death of your understanding of your wife. That's 2 losses at once. Give yourself permission to feel shitty about it. I don't have time to feel shitty. I have to meet with HR Wednesday, sign divorce papers Thursday, figure out how to divide a life by Friday. Then feel shitty next week, schedule it, put it in your calendar. Tuesday, 2 p.m., fall apart completely. Wednesday, 2 p.m., put yourself back together. I almost smiled at that. You think it works that way? No, but you're going to try anyway because that's who you are. You're going to compartmentalize and schedule and organize your way through grief because the alternative is chaos and you hate chaos. He was right. He knew me better than I knew myself sometimes. We finished the pizza and the beers and watched a game neither of us cared about. And for a few hours, I felt almost normal. Almost okay. Almost like a person instead of a collection of wounds held together by spite and stubbornness. When David left at 11, he hugged me at the door. Call me if you need anything, and I mean anything. Company, conversation, help burying a body, whatever. I'll be fine. I know you will, but you don't have to be fine alone. After he left, I locked the door and walked through my empty house one more time. Checked the locks on windows, turned off lights, did all the small rituals of ending a day. In the bathroom, I caught sight of myself in the mirror. I looked older, tired, like someone who'd aged years and weeks. But I also looked different in a way I couldn't quite name. Harder, maybe, or clearer. Like grief had burned away some softness I'd been carrying, leaving something more essential behind. I went to bed and actually slept. 6 hours of dreamless unconsciousness that felt like mercy. And when I woke Tuesday morning to more messages, more questions, more people wanting to know the story, I answered them all with the same methodical honesty. Because this was what I'd chosen. This path of radical truth-telling, of refusing to let Rachel's lies stand unchallenged. And if it made me look vindictive or cruel or unforgiving, so be it. At least I could look at myself in the mirror and know I'd told the truth. At least I could live with who I was becoming. At least I could sleep at night. That had to be worth something. Wednesday morning arrived cold and bright, the kind of November day that makes everything look crisp and unforgiving. I dressed in my best suit, the charcoal one I'd worn to job interviews and funerals, occasions that required gravitas, and drove to Cascade Tech's headquarters downtown. The building was all glass and steel, aggressively modern, the kind of place that probably had a meditation room and kombucha on tap. I'd been here before, to company parties where Rachel had introduced me to colleagues whose names I forgot immediately, where Marcus had shaken my hand and smiled and looked me in the eye while planning to betray me. Security directed me to the 14th floor. Jennifer Ward's office overlooked the city, floor-to-ceiling windows that made everything feel exposed. She stood when I entered, mid-40s, professional suit, the kind of face that gave nothing away. Mr. Rothstein, thank you for coming. She gestured to a chair across from her desk. Can I get you anything? Coffee? Water? I'm fine, thank you. She sat, folded her hands on the desk between us, and got straight to it. I'll be direct. We've received reports of an inappropriate relationship between two of our employees. Based on the information we've gathered so far, your name has come up as someone who might have relevant knowledge. Before we proceed, I need to clarify, you are under no legal obligation to speak with me. This is entirely voluntary. I understand. And anything you tell me will be used in our internal investigation and could result in disciplinary action against the employees involved. Are you comfortable with that? I thought about Rachel, about the job she'd worked so hard for, the career she'd built. Thought about what losing it would mean for her future, for whatever life she was planning with Marcus. Then I thought about the lies, the betrayal, the year of fake fertility treatments, the 2 weeks in the Bahamas paid for with our savings. I'm comfortable with that, I said. Jennifer pulled out a legal pad. Walk me through what you know. I did. I told her about discovering the affair, about the phone records and text messages, about the Bahamas trip that Rachel had claimed was a work conference. I told her about Marcus, about how long they'd been colleagues, about the progression from friendship to something more. Do you have documentation? Jennifer asked. I pulled out a flash drive I'd prepared specifically for this meeting. This contains phone records, text messages, credit card receipts, hotel reservations, and security camera footage from your parking garage showing Rachel and Marcus leaving together on multiple occasions when they'd both supposedly worked late. She took the drive, turned it over in her hands. Security camera footage. How did you obtain that? I didn't. A friend who works in building security did. He's prepared to testify if necessary. That was a lie. I'd paid a security contractor $200 to pull the footage, and he'd made it very clear he wouldn't testify to anything. But Jennifer didn't need to know that. She plugged in the drive, opened the files, her face remaining professionally neutral as she scanned through evidence. This is quite thorough. I had a lot of time to be thorough. She looked up from the screen. Mr. Rothstein, I need to ask you something directly. What's your goal here? Are you seeking revenge against your wife and against these employees? Or are you genuinely concerned about company policy violations? I considered the question. The honest answer was complicated. It was both revenge and principle, hurt and justice, personal pain and legitimate concern about workplace ethics. My wife had an affair, I said slowly. That's personal, and it's painful, and yes, I'm angry about it. But she also used company resources to conduct that affair. She claimed work trips that were actually vacations. She used office time for personal communications. She and Marcus created a situation where their colleagues had to cover for them, had to lie about their whereabouts, had to be complicit in something that violated your company's ethics policy. I leaned forward. So yes, this is personal, but it's also a legitimate workplace issue. And I think your other employees deserve to work in an environment where people follow the rules, where married colleagues don't use company time and resources to conduct affairs, where professional boundaries actually mean something. Jennifer studied me for a long moment. You're very articulate for someone in your situation. I've had time to think about how to articulate it. She turned back to her computer, clicked through more files. This footage from the parking garage, when was this taken? Multiple dates from July through October. The timestamps are in the file names. And these hotel receipts, they show charges to Marcus Chen's personal credit card, but some of them are from afternoons when both employees were supposedly at client meetings. Yes. Did you verify with the clients whether those meetings actually happened? No, that felt like overstepping, but I'm sure your records show whether they billed those hours as client work. She made a note on her legal pad. They did. We've already pulled their timesheets. Something in her tone told me Rachel and Marcus were in deeper trouble than they knew. Billing personal time as client work wasn't just an ethics violation, it was fraud. Is there anything else you can tell me that might be relevant to our investigation? I thought about the birth control deception, about the fertility treatments, about all the personal betrayals that had nothing to do with Cascade Tech's policies. No, everything else is private between Rachel and me. I appreciate your discretion. She ejected the flash drive, slid it back across the desk. Keep this. We've copied everything we need. And Mr. Rothstein, for what it's worth, I'm sorry you're going through this. Workplace affairs create victims beyond just the spouses involved. They damage team dynamics, create liability for the company, and force colleagues into uncomfortable positions. I appreciate that. We'll be conducting our investigation over the next 2 weeks. I can't tell you what the outcome will be, but I can tell you we take these matters seriously. If employees violate our ethics policy, especially if they commit timesheet fraud, there are consequences. I stood to leave, shook her hand. Thank you for your time. Mr. Rothstein? She walked me to the door. I've been doing this job for 15 years. I've seen a lot of workplace affairs. Most of the betrayed spouses who come in here are angry, vengeful, looking to cause maximum damage. You're not like that. I'm angry, I said honestly. I'm very angry, but I'm trying to channel it into something constructive instead of destructive. Well, you're doing a remarkable job. I hope you find peace with all of this. I rode the elevator down 14 floors, walked through the lobby past employees who might have known about Rachel and Marcus, who might have covered for them, who might have watched my marriage dissolve in real time while pretending ignorance. Outside, the November air felt sharp and clean. I stood on the sidewalk for a moment, letting it clear my head, trying to process what I'd just done. I'd potentially cost Rachel her job, her career, the financial independence she'd fought so hard for. I waited to feel guilty, waited for remorse to hit me, for second thoughts to creep in. But all I felt was tired, and maybe underneath that, the smallest flicker of satisfaction. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "This is Marcus. We need to talk. Now, meet me at the coffee shop on 5th. I stared at the message, debated ignoring it, then decided why not. One more conversation, one more chance to hear him try to explain the inexplicable. I texted back. 30 minutes. Marcus was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table with the 2 cups of coffee going cold in front of him. He looked terrible, unshaven, rumpled, like he'd slept in his car. His leg was bouncing under the table, nervous energy radiating off him in waves. "Thanks for coming," he said as I sat down. "You have 20 minutes. Talk." HR called me in yesterday, asked me questions about Rachel, about our relationship, about work trips and client billing. They're investigating us, James. They're looking at timesheet records and expense reports, and he ran his hands through his hair. "Did you talk to them?" I answered their questions honestly. "You gave them evidence. Security footage, credit card receipts. You're trying to get us fired." "I'm trying to get divorced. What your employer does with information about your ethics violations is their choice, not mine." "Ethics violations," he laughed bitterly. "That's what you're calling it? We fell in love, James. That's not a violation. You fell in love on company time. You billed personal hours as client work. You used office resources to conduct an affair. That's not romance, Marcus. That's fraud." He slumped in his chair. "Rachel's going to lose her job. They basically told her that yesterday, and I'll probably lose mine too. We'll both be blacklisted in the industry, unable to get references, starting over from nothing." "Consequences," I said simply. "For what? For being human? For making mistakes? For lying, for stealing company time? For creating a hostile work environment where your colleagues had to cover for you?" I leaned forward. "You want to know what really bothers me about this, Marcus? Not that you fell in love with my wife. Feelings happen, I get that. What bothers me is how entitled you both are. How you act like the rules don't apply to you, like you should be able to conduct an affair on your employer's dime and face no consequences because your feelings are special. That's not, it is fair. You made choices, adult choices. Now you get adult consequences. That's how the world works." He stared at his coffee, and I watched him realize that charm wouldn't work here, that I wasn't someone he could sweet talk or manipulate. "What do you want from me, James? An apology?" "I already gave you one. Groveling. I'll do it if that's what it takes." "I don't want anything from you. I wanted the truth, which I got. I wanted the affair documented, which it is. I wanted to make sure everyone knew what really happened, and now they do. There's nothing else you have that I need." "Rachel said you're destroying her life out of spite." "Rachel destroyed her own life. I'm just refusing to help her hide the wreckage." I stood up. "Your 20 minutes are up. Don't contact me again." "Wait." He grabbed my arm, and I looked down at his hand until he released it. "Just one thing. The question you asked her about me having an illness. There really isn't one, is there?" "No, so why?" "Because I wanted her to feel afraid. I wanted her to panic, to run to a doctor, to sit in a waiting room imagining worst-case scenarios. I wanted her to experience a fraction of the fear I felt when I got tested for STDs, because my wife had been sleeping with someone else without my knowledge." I met his eyes. "I wanted her to understand that actions have consequences beyond just the ones you intend." Understanding dawned on his face. That's psychological warfare. That's karma." I walked out before he could respond, left him sitting there with his cold coffee and his crumbling future. The satisfaction I'd been waiting for finally arrived. Not a flood, just a trickle, but real. Marcus understood now. Understood that I wasn't going to be passive or forgiving or understanding. Understood that there was a price for what he'd done, and I was going to make sure he paid it. My phone buzzed as I reached my car. Jennifer Ward. Thank you for your cooperation today. Your information was very helpful. Then 30 seconds later, another text from an unknown number. I opened it expecting more from Marcus, but it was Rachel. They're firing me. I hope you're happy. I hope destroying my career makes you feel better about your own failures. I read it twice, felt each word like a slap, then deleted the message without responding. She wanted a fight, wanted to make me the villain, wanted to turn her consequences into my cruelty. But I was done engaging with her narrative, done defending myself against accusations from someone who'd lost all credibility. I drove home through afternoon traffic, past coffee shops and grocery stores, and all the normal places where normal people lived normal lives. My life didn't feel normal anymore. It felt like performance art, the dissolution of a marriage, an installation piece featuring evidence and accusations and consequences. At home, I found a box on my doorstep. No return address, just my name in Rachel's handwriting. Inside were items I'd left at her parents' house over the years. A jacket, some books, a photo album from our honeymoon. Things she no longer wanted contaminated with my presence. The photo album hurt. I flipped through it. Us at Niagara Falls, laughing in the rain, young and in love, and so stupidly certain about our future. Rachel in a sundress, me with my arm around her waist, both of us looking at the camera like we were showing the world what happiness looked like. That couple didn't exist anymore. Those people were gone, replaced by strangers who'd spent the afternoon trying to hurt each other through lawyers and HR departments and carefully deployed truths. I closed the album, put it in a drawer I wouldn't open again, and sat down at my kitchen table with the divorce papers that needed signing, the financial documents that needed reviewing, the administrative dismantling of a 12-year relationship. My phone rang. My lawyer, Sandra, calling with updates. James, hi. I have news about the divorce proceedings. Go ahead. Rachel's attorney is pushing back on the amended agreement. They're claiming the reimbursement clause for fertility treatments is punitive and not based in legal precedent. It's based on fraud. She lied about trying to conceive while actively preventing conception. I agree, and I think we can argue that successfully. But be prepared. This might go to mediation. Rachel's not going to just accept your terms without a fight. Fine, let her fight, Adonis. I have evidence. I know you do. But evidence cuts both ways, James. She could argue emotional distress, could claim your behavior after discovering the affair was psychologically harmful, could paint you as vindictive. Let her try, Sandra sighed. I'm saying this as your lawyer and your friend. At some point, you need to decide if being right is worth the cost of proving it. Divorce mediation can get ugly and expensive fast. Are you prepared for that? I thought about the question she'd asked, the cost of being right, the price of truth. Yes, I said finally. I'm prepared. Okay, then we'll prepare for mediation. I'll file the motion next week. After we hung up, I sat in my kitchen and thought about what was coming. More lawyers, more meetings, more careful recitations of betrayal, more documented evidence of awesome gun, more public airing of private pain. Rachel wanted a fight, wanted to make this difficult, wanted to punish me for refusing to quietly accept her narrative. Fine, I could fight. I'd gotten good at it over the past few weeks. My phone buzzed again. David. Heard about the HR meeting. How'd it go? It went. Rachel's probably getting fired. And you feel... I tried to identify the emotion. Satisfaction, guilt, relief. It was all tangled together, impossible to separate. I feel like I did what I had to do, I typed back. Whether that makes me right or just vindictive, I don't know anymore. For what it's worth, I think you were right. She made choices. You're just making sure those choices have consequences. I wanted to believe that, wanted to think I was motivated by justice rather than revenge, by truth rather than cruelty. But sitting alone in my kitchen, surrounded by evidence of my dissolving marriage, I wondered if there was really a difference, if pursuing truth with this much determination wasn't just revenge in a prettier package, if I was becoming someone I'd recognize when this was all over. I didn't have answers, just questions and evidence and the slow, grinding work of ending a marriage while trying to preserve my integrity. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the kitchen in shades of orange and gold. Beautiful. Indifferent. The world kept turning, regardless of my pain, regardless of Rachel's consequences, regardless of whether any of this mattered in the long run. I pulled out the final piece of evidence I'd been saving. The thing I hadn't shown anyone yet, not even David. The revelation that would change everything one more time. But not tonight. Tonight I was too tired for more truth-telling, more revelations, more carefully orchestrated justice. Tonight I would just sit in my kitchen and watch the sun set and try to remember who I was before all of this started. Tomorrow I would detonate the last bomb. Tomorrow would be the final reckoning. But tonight I would rest. Thursday morning I woke with the kind of clarity that comes from decisions already made, from crossing a threshold you can't uncross. Today was the day, the final truth, the last piece that would reframe everything that had come before. I'd been holding this back deliberately, strategically, waiting for the moment when it would have maximum impact. When Rachel thought she'd seen all my evidence, heard all my accusations, faced all her consequences. Now was that moment. I sent 3 emails before breakfast. To Rachel's lawyer, scheduling emergency mediation. New evidence has come to light that affects asset division. To my lawyer, Sandra, we need to talk. This morning if possible. It's urgent. To Rachel, we need to meet. Today, 2 p.m. at the house. Come alone. This is important. Then I pulled out the folder I'd been keeping locked in my desk drawer for 2 weeks. The one even David hadn't seen. The one containing evidence so explosive it would fundamentally alter the entire divorce. Sandra called at 9. What's this about new evidence? Can you come to my house? I need to show you something in person. James, if this is just more texts or photos, it's not. Trust me, you need to see this. She arrived at 10, briefcase in hand, professional skepticism on her face. I led her to my office, closed the door and handed her the folder. This is a financial forensic report commissioned from a private investigator, I said. It covers Rachel's banking activity for the past 3 years. Sandra opened the folder, started reading, and her expression shifted from skeptical to shocked to something like awe. Holy shit. Keep reading. She flipped through pages, her lawyer brain processing implications faster than she could articulate them. This is, James, do you understand what this means? I understand exactly what it means. Rachel's been hiding assets, significant assets. This offshore account, these transfers, she's been systematically moving money out of your joint accounts into accounts you don't have access to for 3 years. 2 years and 8 months, according to the report. It started small, 100 here, 200 there, but it escalated. The report estimates she's hidden approximately $127,000 from the marital estate. Sandra looked up from the papers, her face pale. Have you confronted her about this? Not yet. I wanted to talk to you first. Understand the legal implications. The legal implications are significant. If she's been hiding assets during divorce proceedings, that's fraud. The court will not look kindly on this. She could lose her claim to any shared property. You could potentially get a much larger share of the marital assets. She flipped to another page. Wait, this offshore account, when was it opened? 4 years ago, before the affair started. So she's been planning an exit strategy for 4 years? Apparently. Sandra sat down heavily in my desk chair. James, this changes everything. The story about the affair, about Marcus, about her being swept up in emotion. It all falls apart when you realize she's been preparing to leave you for years. This is premeditated financial fraud. I know. And you've been sitting on this for how long? I found out 2 weeks ago. The investigator finished his report the day after Rachel signed the initial divorce papers. Why didn't you tell me immediately? Because I needed to think about what I wanted to do with the information. Because once I deployed this, there was no going back. Because I stopped, tried to articulate something I'd been feeling but hadn't named. Because this is the nuclear option, Sandra. This doesn't just end our marriage. This destroys Rachel financially, legally, possibly criminally. And I needed to be absolutely certain I was willing to do that. And are you certain? I thought about the question. About Rachel crying in our dining room. About her losing her job. about the consequences she was already facing. Thought about whether adding this to the pile was justice or just cruelty. Then I thought about the birth control deception. About a year of my life spent trying to conceive a child she was actively preventing. About her planning an exit strategy for 4 years while I was planning our future. Yes, I said, I'm certain. Sandra closed the folder. Then we file an emergency motion to freeze all her accounts pending investigation of asset concealment. We amend the divorce petition to include fraud allegations, and we prepare for this to get very, very ugly. How ugly? Potential criminal charges ugly. Jail time ugly. This isn't just civil court anymore, James. If the DA gets interested in financial fraud during divorce proceedings, Rachel could be facing felony charges. The weight of that settled over me. I'd known this was serious, but hearing it articulated in terms of criminal liability made it real in a new way. I don't want her to go to jail, I said slowly. I want her to face consequences, but not that. Then we offer her a deal. She returns all the hidden assets, accepts an amended divorce agreement heavily weighted in your favor, and we don't pursue criminal charges. She gets to walk away with something instead of nothing. That seems fair. Fair, Sandra laughed without humor. James, none of this is fair. She stole over $100,000 from your marriage while planning to leave you. Fair would be her in handcuffs. What you're proposing is mercy. Maybe, or maybe it was just exhaustion, the knowledge that pursuing maximum punishment would require more energy, more time, more of my life spent locked in combat with someone I used to love. Set up the meeting with her lawyer, I said. Show them the evidence. Give them 24 hours to respond with a settlement offer. If they don't, we file criminal complaints. You're sure about this? No, but I'm doing it anyway. Sandra left with the folder, promising to have Rachel's lawyer served with notice by end of day. I sat in my office and tried to process what I just set in motion. At 1:45, my doorbell rang. Rachel, 15 minutes early, looking nervous. You said this was important, she said when I opened the door. It is, come in. We sat in the living room, not the dining room, scene of too many previous confrontations. She perched on the edge of the couch like a bird ready to fly, and I sat across from her in the armchair that used to be ours and was now just mine. Your lawyer should be calling you any minute, I said, but I wanted you to hear this from me first. Hear what? Before I could answer, her phone rang. She looked at the screen, frowned. It's my lawyer. You should answer. She did. I watched her face cycle through confusion, shock, horror, panic. Watched her understand in real time that I'd found her secret, that the carefully constructed exit plan she'd been building for years had just collapsed. I'll call you back, she whispered into the phone, then hung up and stared at me with something like terror. You found the offshore account. I found all of it, the transfers, the hidden savings, the systematic theft of marital assets. 127,000, Rachel. You stole 127,000 from our marriage while pretending we were partners. It's not stealing. That money was mine, from bonuses, and bonuses earned during our marriage are marital property. Moving them into secret accounts is asset concealment. And doing it while we're in divorce proceedings is fraud. Criminal fraud. She went white. Criminal? My lawyer is filing an emergency motion as we speak. Unless you agree to settlement terms, this goes to the DA's office tomorrow. You're bluffing. I pulled out a copy of the forensic report, slid it across the coffee table. Read it. She did. I watched the understanding dawn that I wasn't bluffing, that I had documentation, that she was in serious legal trouble. James, please. You have to understand, I was scared. I didn't know what would happen with us, and I needed a safety net, and you planned this for 4 years. 4 years of systematically stealing from me while I thought we were building a life together. I wasn't planning to leave you. I was protecting myself in case something happened. Something like an affair you'd conduct for 6 months before taking a 2-week vacation with your lover. I leaned forward. Don't lie to me anymore, Rachel. The evidence is clear. You've been preparing to leave me for years. The affair with Marcus wasn't an impulsive mistake. It was part of a long-term plan. She was crying now, makeup running, hands shaking. What do you want? What will it take for you to not press charges? Everything. What? Everything you hid. Every dollar returned to joint accounts. Plus penalties. I want 70% of our total marital assets, including the house. You get 30% and you walk away. No alimony, no claims on my retirement, no contested property division. I can't agree to that. I'll have nothing. You'll have $127,000 more than you deserve, plus 30% of everything else. That's more mercy than you showed me. She stood up, paced the room like a caged animal. I can't believe you'd do this. After everything we've been through, you'd threaten me with jail time? After everything we've been through? Rachel, you spent 4 years stealing from me. 6 months sleeping with someone else. A year lying about wanting children. You've shown me exactly who you are. I'm just responding accordingly. I loved you, she said desperately. I still love you. This money thing, it was insurance. It didn't mean I wanted to leave. Stop. I stood too, met her eyes. Stop lying. To me, to yourself, to anyone who'll listen. You didn't love me. You can't love someone and systematically steal from them. You can't love someone and sleep with their coworker. You can't love someone and lie about wanting children while preventing conception. Whatever you felt for me, it wasn't love. It was convenience. It was comfort. It was having someone to pay half the mortgage while you built your escape plan. She sank back onto the couch, sobbing. I'm sorry. God, James, I'm so sorry. I never meant for any of this to happen. You meant all of it. Every transfer, every law, every choice. You just didn't mean to get caught. Her phone rang again. Her lawyer, probably with more details about the charges she was facing. She ignored it, let it ring through to voicemail. What do I do? She whispered. You take the settlement. You return the money. You accept 30 and count yourself lucky I'm not pursuing criminal charges. And Marcus? What about him? Does he know about this? About the money? I hadn't even considered that angle. I don't know. Did you tell him? No, I didn't tell anyone. It was my safety net in case I what? Left you? Wasn't that supposed to be my line? You're the one who had the affair, who stole money, who was planning an exit. She looked at me with something like desperation. What if I give everything back? What if I agree to your terms and we try again? We go to counseling, we work through this, No. James, please, no, Rachel. There's no coming back from this. Not the affair, not the money, not the lies. You killed our marriage. You don't get to resurrect it just because the consequences are scarier than you expected. She sat there crying, and I felt nothing. No sympathy, no regret, not even satisfaction. Just emptiness. Just the hollow realization that I was looking at a stranger wearing my wife's face. You have until tomorrow at 5 p.m. to accept the settlement terms, I said. After that, we file criminal complaints and let the courts handle everything. Your choice. I walked to the door, opened it, waited for her to leave. She gathered her purse with shaking hands, walked past me without looking up. James? She paused on the threshold. When did you stop loving me? I thought about the question, about the moment I'd seen that photo from the Bahamas, about reading the text, about discovering the birth control deception, about finding the hidden accounts. Honestly, I think you stopped being lovable long before I stopped loving you. I just took a while to notice. She flinched like I'd struck her, then walked to her car. I watched her drive away one more time, probably the last time, and I felt the final thread of connection between us snap. Inside, my phone was ringing. Sandra. Her lawyer just called. They want to negotiate. Tell them my terms are non-negotiable. Full return of assets, 70-30 split, or we go criminal. James, they're asking for 48 hours to review. They have 24. This isn't a negotiation, Sandra. This is consequences. Understood. I'll let them know. I hung up and walked through my house. My house now, not ours. Looked at the furniture we'd bought together, the photos we'd taken, the life we'd built. All of it feeling like a museum now. Artifacts of something that used to exist. My phone buzzed. A text from David. You okay? Define okay, I typed back. Fair point. Want company? Not tonight, I need to sit with this. Okay, but I'm here if you need me. I set down the phone and poured myself a drink. Whiskey, neat, the expensive stuff from the back of the cabinet. Sat in my living room as afternoon faded to evening, as shadows lengthened across furniture that suddenly felt temporary. Tomorrow, Rachel would either accept my terms or face criminal charges. Tomorrow, the divorce would either settle quietly or explode into public spectacle. Tomorrow, I would either close this chapter of my life or commit to fighting it for months, maybe years. But tonight I just sat in the ruins of my marriage and tried to figure out who I was now that it was over. The man who'd gotten married at 22 had believed in forever, had believed that love was enough, that commitment mattered, that promises meant something. The man sitting here at 34 knew better, knew that people lied, that vows broke, that the person you married could become a stranger without you even noticing until it was too late. I didn't know which version of myself I preferred, the naive believer or the cynical survivor. Maybe I'd become some third thing, someone who'd been broken and put himself back together into a different shape, someone who'd learned that truth matters more than peace, that consequences matter more than forgiveness, that sometimes the only way through pain is straight through it. My phone buzzed again. Rachel, I'll sign your agreement. Just please don't press charges. I stared at the message for a long time before responding. Have your lawyer send the signed documents to Sandra by 5 p.m. tomorrow. Thank you. I didn't respond to that. There was nothing to say. She wasn't thanking me for mercy. She was thanking me for accepting the inevitable, for choosing the path that ended this quickly rather than dragging it through courts and trials and public humiliation. I finished my drink, went upstairs to bed, lay in the darkness, trying to feel something about winning, about getting everything I'd asked for, about Rachel finally facing the full weight of her choices. But I felt nothing, just tired, just ready for this to be over. Tomorrow would bring signed papers and transferred funds and the final dissolution of a 12-year marriage. Tomorrow would bring closure, whatever that meant. Tonight I just lay in bed and listened to the house settle around me, to the absence where Rachel used to be, to the silence of a life being dismantled one piece at a time. And somewhere in that silence, I fell asleep. 3 months later, I woke to sunlight streaming through bedroom windows I'd forgotten to close and reached automatically for someone who wasn't there anymore. The muscle memory of marriage, still twitching, still reaching, still hoping despite everything, that the last 90 days had been a particularly vivid nightmare. But the empty space beside me was real. The divorce papers filed in January were real. The 70-30 asset split was real. Rachel's signature on settlement documents was real. The end of my marriage was as real as the morning sun. I went downstairs, my stairs now, in my house, paid for with my 70% of our assets, and made coffee in a kitchen that still felt too big for one person. Outside, February snow fell soft and silent, covering the driveway where Rachel's suitcase had once rolled, the walkway where she'd stood dripping rain and lies, the street where her car had driven away for the last time. My phone showed 2 text messages. From David, breakfast? I'm buying. From Sandra, final documents are ready for review. Stop by the office when you can. Final documents, the last administrative detail of a dissolved marriage, the period at the end of a sentence that had run on far too long. I texted David, Rosie's Diner, 9 a.m. Then I showered, dressed, and drove through snow-quiet streets to meet my best friend for breakfast and closure. David was already there when I arrived, sitting in a booth by the window, 2 cups of coffee going cold between his hands. He looked up when I slid in across from him, studied my face with the practiced eye of someone who'd been watching me barely hold it together for months. You look better, he said. I look the same. No, you actually look better. Less, he gestured vaguely at my face. Less haunted, less like you're one bad day away from a complete breakdown. Maybe I already had my breakdown and you missed it. Did you? I thought about it, about the nights I'd spent staring at ceiling cracks, the mornings I'd forgotten to eat, The weeks that had blurred together into undifferentiated grief. I don't know, maybe. Or maybe I'm still having it, just very slowly. The waitress came, Rosie herself, 60s and cigarette-voiced and kind. The usual, James? I realized I'd been coming here often enough to have a usual. Yeah, thanks, Rosie. She patted my shoulder, that universal gesture of, I heard about your divorce and I'm sorry, then went to put in my order. Everyone in town knows, I said to David. Small towns are like that. Secrets don't last. He took a sip of coffee. How does it feel, being the wronged husband, the sympathetic victim? Exhausting, but satisfying? I considered the question. Over the past 3 months, I'd become a minor celebrity in our social circle. The man whose wife had betrayed him, who'd responded with calm dignity, who'd emerged from the wreckage with his integrity intact. People bought me drinks, offered sympathy, treated me like I'd survived something heroic. I don't know about satisfying, I said finally. Validating, maybe. Everyone knows the truth now. Everyone knows what Rachel did. But it doesn't. I stopped, tried to articulate something I'd been feeling. It doesn't make me feel better. It just makes me feel confirmed. Like, yes, I was right to be hurt. Yes, she was wrong. But that confirmation doesn't heal anything. It just makes the wound official. David nodded slowly. Have you heard from her since the settlement? Once, she emailed to ask about splitting up the last of our shared possessions. I told her to keep whatever she wanted, that I didn't care anymore. And did you care? No, they're just things. Furniture and kitchen appliances and photos from a life that doesn't exist anymore. She can have all of it. My breakfast arrived, pancakes I'd ordered out of habit and wouldn't finish. I pushed them around the plate while David watched with the patience of someone who'd spent 3 months watching me not eat. Sandra said the final documents are ready, I said. The divorce is final? Officially final as of February 1st. I'm technically single again. I tried the word out, felt it sit wrong in my mouth. Single. After 12 years of being half of a couple, I'm just me, unattached, alone. You're not alone. You have friends, family, a whole support network of people who I know, and I'm grateful. But it's not the same as having a person, someone who knows all your stories, who understands your weird habits, who can finish your sentences. I set down my fork. I lost more than a wife, David. I lost my witness. The person who could verify my memories, who could confirm that, yes, that thing happened. Yes, that's what we said. Yes, we really did promise forever. Rachel was a liar and a thief, not much of a witness. But she was my liar and thief. She was the person I'd built 12 years of history with. And now all that history is what? Contaminated? Unreliable? How much of our marriage was real? And how much was performance? I don't even know anymore. David reached across the table, gripped my hand. The love you felt was real. Maybe hers wasn't, or maybe it was real and she destroyed it anyway. But your love, your commitment, your effort, that was all real. Don't let her betrayal make you doubt yourself. I wanted to believe that. Wanted to think that my half of the marriage had value even if hers didn't. But it was hard to trust my own memories when the person who shared them had rewritten the whole story. What happened with the HR investigation? David asked, changing the subject. They fired both of them, Rachel and Marcus. Timesheet fraud plus ethics violations. It was in the company memo last month. How do you know? You don't work there. Sarah forwarded it to me. She thought I'd want to know. I picked at my pancakes. Marcus moved to Seattle, apparently. Took a job with a tech startup, starting over. Rachel's still here, living with her parents, working temp jobs while she figures out what's next. Have you seen her? Once, at the grocery store. We made eye contact across the produce section, and I watched her decide whether to approach me. She didn't. Just turned around and walked the other way. How did that feel? Like seeing a ghost? Like encountering someone who used to matter, who used to be central to my life, and realizing they're just another person now. A stranger who happens to know where I'm ticklish and how I take my coffee. We sat in silence for a while, David eating his omelet, me not eating my pancakes, both of us watching snow fall outside the window. What comes next? David asked finally. Now that it's officially over? Now that you're officially single, what's the plan? I don't know. I've spent 3 months focused on ending things. I haven't thought much about beginning again. Maybe it's time to start thinking about it. Maybe. But the truth was, I didn't know how to begin again. Didn't know how to date after 12 years of marriage. Didn't know how to trust someone new when the person I'd trusted most had betrayed me so completely. Didn't know how to open myself to vulnerability again when vulnerability had cost me so much. There's something I haven't told you, I said suddenly, about the offshore account, about the hidden money. David set down his fork. I thought Rachel returned all of it as part of the settlement. She did, all $127,000, plus penalties. But there was more. More? The forensic investigator found additional accounts, smaller ones, harder to trace. Another $43,000 scattered across various institutions. Money Rachel had been hiding for even longer. Did you confront her about it? No, I documented it, showed it to Sandra, and we decided to let it go. David stared at me. You let her keep $43,000 that she stole from you? I let her keep her escape fund because I realized I stopped trying to articulate something I'd been feeling. I realized that taking everything would make me feel powerful, but it wouldn't make me feel better. And at some point, revenge stops being justice and becomes just cruelty. So I drew a line. She returned the money she hid during our marriage. She accepted the 70-30 split. And I let her keep the accounts I legally could have claimed but morally felt belonged to her fear more than my anger. James, that's incredibly mature. Or incredibly stupid, I'm not sure which. It's both, but mostly it's you choosing to be the person you want to be instead of the person the situation tried to make you. Maybe. Or maybe I was just tired of fighting. Tired of evidence and accusations and carefully deployed truths. Tired of winning battles that left me feeling hollowed out instead of vindicated. We finished breakfast, David eating, me picking, and walked out into February snow that was already turning to slush. He hugged me goodbye in the parking lot, that brief masculine embrace that communicated everything words couldn't. You're going to be okay, he said. I know it doesn't feel like it yet, but you will be. How do you know? Because you're already okay. You just haven't noticed yet. I drove to Sandra's office, signed the final documents that officially ended my marriage, accepted her congratulations that felt more like condolences. Then I drove home through streets that were starting to look familiar again, through a town that was slowly becoming mine instead of ours. At home, I walked through rooms that I'd finally finished reorganizing. New furniture in the living room, fresh paint in the bedroom, photos on the walls that showed my life before Rachel, my life after Rachel, but nothing from the 12 years in between. It was like our marriage had never happened, like I'd erased it from the record. Except I couldn't erase it from myself. Couldn't undo 12 years of growth and change. Couldn't unknow the things I'd learned about love and betrayal and trust. Couldn't become again the man I'd been at 22, naive and hopeful, and certain that promising forever meant something. That man was gone, replaced by this one. Harder, clearer, more careful. Someone who'd learned that people lie, that promises break, that forever is just a word people say when they mean for now. So I sat in my living room and looked at the space where Rachel used to be. The couch we'd picked out together, now replaced. The TV we'd watched, now sold. The coffee table where she'd signed divorce papers, now gone. Everything physical was gone, but the shape of her remained. Negative space, the outline of what used to be there, visible only by its absence. My phone buzzed, an email from Rachel. The first communication in weeks. Subject, closure. Body, James, I know I don't have the right to ask anything of you. I know I destroyed what we had, that I hurt you in ways I'm still understanding. But I'm writing because my therapist says closure requires acknowledging harm, and I want to acknowledge what I did to you. I lied about the affair, about wanting children, about the money. I lied so much and for so long that I stopped knowing what was true. I convinced myself that our marriage was unhappy because that made the affair feel justified. I told myself you didn't care because that made my deception easier. I created a narrative where I was the victim of a dead marriage instead of the person who killed it. You were right about everything. The calculated nature of my betrayal, the length of my deception, the way I systematically destroyed what we built while pretending to protect it. You were right that I chose comfort over honesty, that I prioritized my desires over your well-being, that I betrayed you in ways that went far beyond physical infidelity. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't expect you to respond to this email or acknowledge it or do anything with it, except maybe feel slightly less like you're crazy for being hurt. Because you're not crazy. You're wounded by someone who promised not to wound you. And that's on me. Completely on me. I'm working on becoming someone different. Someone more honest, more accountable, more aware of how my choices affect others. I don't know if I'll succeed, but I'm trying. I hope you find happiness. Real happiness. With someone who deserves your trust and honors your faith. You're a good man, James. You deserved a better wife than I knew how to be. I'm sorry for all of it, even though sorry doesn't fix anything. Rachel, I read it 3 times, looking for manipulation, for hidden agendas, for some ulterior motive beyond what it claimed to be. But it just seemed honest. Raw. The first truly honest thing Rachel had said to me in years. I sat with the email for a long time, trying to decide how to feel about it. Satisfied that she'd finally admitted everything? Angry that it took divorce for her to be truthful? Sad that this apology came 3 months too late to matter? Finally, I closed the email without responding. Because she was right. Sorry didn't fix anything. It didn't undo the betrayal, didn't restore the trust, didn't erase the year I'd spent trying to conceive a child she was preventing. It was just words, arriving after the fact, offering nothing but the acknowledgement of harm I'd already lived through. Maybe someday I'd respond. Maybe someday I'd accept her apology, forgive the betrayal, find peace with what happened. But not today. Today I just needed to sit in my house, and let myself feel the full weight of an ending. Outside, the snow had stopped. The sun was setting, painting everything in shades of orange and gold. Beautiful, indifferent. Moving forward regardless of my pain, regardless of Rachel's apologies, regardless of whether any of this had mattered. I stood at the window and watched the sunset, the same sunset I'd watched 3 months ago. When this all began, when Rachel walked in glowing with lies, and I asked her about an illness that didn't exist. So much had changed since then. The marriage ended, the truth revealed, the consequences delivered. But I was still here, still standing, still breathing, still capable of watching a sunset and finding it beautiful despite everything. Maybe David was right. Maybe I was already okay, just hadn't noticed yet. Or maybe I was just good at survival, at putting one foot in front of the other, at breathing in and out, at continuing to exist even when existing felt exhausting. My phone buzzed one more time. A text from my mother. Dinner Sunday? Dad wants to try his new smoker. Normal things. Family dinners and new smokers and parents who love me, even though my marriage had failed. I texted back, I'll be there. And then, because I couldn't think of anything else to do, because the alternative was sitting alone in the dark with Rachel's apology and my own complicated feelings, I put on my coat and went for a walk. The neighborhood was quiet, snow-muffled, peaceful. I walked past houses where families were eating dinner, where TVs glowed blue in living rooms, where normal people lived normal lives unburdened by betrayal and divorce and carefully documented truths. I walked until my fingers were numb and my face was cold and the sun had fully set. Until I couldn't feel anything except the physical sensation of moving through space, of existing in a body that would continue regardless of heartbreak. And somewhere during that walk, I made a decision. I would survive this, not just endure it or get through it, actually survive it, come out the other side changed but intact, scarred but standing. I would let Rachel's apology exist without responding to it, would let her guilt be her burden instead of my obligation to absolve. I would stop checking my phone for messages from her, would stop wondering what she was doing or who she was becoming. I would begin the work of building a new life, not built in reaction to the old one, but constructed deliberately, carefully, with the wisdom earned from watching the previous version burn down. I would be okay, eventually, in ways I couldn't predict or control, but first I would be not okay. I would feel everything, the grief, the anger, the betrayal, the loss. I would stop compartmentalizing and controlling and managing, and I would just feel. I walked home through the dark, let myself into my house, and sat down at my kitchen table. And for the first time in 3 months, I cried, not quiet tears or controlled grief, actual sobbing, the kind that shakes your whole body and sounds embarrassing and doesn't care who hears. I cried for the marriage I'd lost, and the wife I'd loved, and the future I'd imagined. I cried for the man I'd been at 22, hopeful and trusting, and the man I'd become at 34, cynical and careful. I cried for 12 years of history that would never be redeemed, for promises that meant nothing, for the particular loneliness of being single after being half of a couple. I cried until I couldn't cry anymore, until I was empty and exhausted and maybe, finally, ready to start over. And then I went to bed, in my house, in my life, in my future that was terrifying and uncertain and completely, utterly mine. Outside, the world kept turning. Inside, I kept breathing. And that, I told myself, was enough. For now, it was enough.
My wife's phone rang. I answered, thinking it was work. A man whispered, "You left your underwear here again." I stayed silent. He giggled, "I love you so much." I quickly ended the call. The voice? IT wasn't a stranger. It was family. You know how they say life can change in an instant? Yeah, well, whoever came up with that gem of wisdom clearly had a crystal ball, because mine went from suburban dad bliss to Jerry Springer episode faster than you can say plot twist from hell. There I was, doing what every red-blooded American husband does on a Tuesday evening, standing at the kitchen sink like some domesticated caveman, scrubbing the remnants of our family dinner off plates that cost more than my first car. The kids had demolished their mac and cheese like tiny Vikings, leaving behind a battlefield of orange cheese dust and the kind of mess that makes you question your life choices. But hey, that's parenthood for you. Equal parts joy and wondering why you didn't invest in paper plate stock. My wife Sarah had bounced out about 20 minutes earlier, muttering something about needing milk and bread from the store. Classic grocery store run that somehow always turns into a 2-hour expedition involving organic kale, artisanal sourdough, and whatever Pinterest told her we absolutely couldn't live without this week. She'd left her phone sitting on the granite counter like it was radioactive waste, which, let me tell you, should have been my first red flag. Sarah and her iPhone had a relationship more committed than most marriages. The woman checked that thing more often than a teenage girl stalking her crush's Instagram. So there I am, elbow deep in sudsy water, when her phone starts buzzing like an angry wasp trapped in a jar. The caller ID just showed a number, no name, no photo of some soccer mom from the PDA or her sister calling to complain about her latest dating disaster. Just digits. Cold, anonymous digits that somehow felt wrong from the get-go. Now, normally I wouldn't touch Sarah's phone with a 10-foot pole. Not because I'm some saint or anything, but because the last time I accidentally answered it, I got stuck in a 40-minute conversation with her cousin about her cat's digestive issues. Trust me, there are some things you can't unhear, and Whisker's bowel movements top that list. But something about this call felt different. Maybe it was the persistent buzzing, or maybe it was that little voice in the back of my head. You know, the one that usually tells you not to eat gas station sushi or trust politicians. Whatever it was, I found myself drying my hands on the dish towel and reaching for the phone. "Hello?" I said, trying to sound casual, like I answered my wife's phone all the time instead of treating it like it might explode if I looked at it wrong. What came next wasn't the cheerful voice of Sarah's book club asking about next week's meeting, or her boss wondering if she could cover an extra shift. No, what I heard was a man's voice, low and intimate, dripping with the kind of familiarity that made my stomach drop, like I'd just missed the last step on a flight of stairs. "You left your underwear here again." The words hit me like a freight train loaded with WTF. My brain did that thing where it tries to process information that doesn't compute, like when you see a stop sign that's blue instead of red. This had to be a wrong number. Had to be. Because the alternative was that some dude was talking to my wife about her underwear, and that thought made me want to punch something expensive. But then came the soft giggle. Not a nervous laugh or an oops, wrong number chuckle. This was the kind of laugh that said secrets, that said inside jokes, that said things I really didn't want to think about. It was followed by 3 little words that might as well have been delivered by a wrecking ball to my chest. I love you so much. My grip on the phone tightened until I thought the screen might crack under the pressure. My ears were burning like someone had set them on fire, and I could feel my pulse hammering in my temples. The voice on the other end wasn't done, either. There was more, something about missing her, about when they could see each other again, about how he couldn't wait to hold her. I hung up, just straight up ended the call like I was hanging up on a telemarketer trying to sell me extended car warranties. But unlike those calls, this one didn't leave me feeling victorious. Instead, I stood there staring at Sarah's phone like it had just grown fangs and started hissing at me. The device sat there on the counter, innocent as a sleeping baby, giving no indication that it had just delivered the kind of news that makes grown men question everything they thought they knew about their lives. The screen went dark, but I kept staring at it, waiting for it to ring again, dreading that it might, hoping that it wouldn't. My mind was racing faster than a NASCAR driver on Red Bull. This had to be a mistake. Had to be. Maybe it was a prank call. Maybe it was some kid with too much time on his hands and a sick sense of humor. Maybe it was a wrong number, and some poor bastard somewhere was wondering why his girlfriend wasn't answering her phone. But deep down, in that place where your gut lives and tells you uncomfortable truths you don't want to hear, I knew better. The voice wasn't that of a stranger. It wasn't some random dude who dialed the wrong number. No, this voice had something that made my blood run cold: familiarity. Not just the familiarity of someone Sarah knew, but someone I knew. The inflection, the way he said certain words, even that damn laugh, they all triggered something in my memory that I wasn't ready to face. I set the phone down carefully, like it might explode if I moved too fast. My hands were shaking, and I realized I was holding my breath. The kitchen suddenly felt too small, too quiet, too normal for what had just happened. The half-washed dishes in the sink, Chloe's drawings stuck to the refrigerator with magnets shaped like farm animals, the grocery list Sarah had written in her neat handwriting. Everything looked the same, but nothing would ever be the same again. That's when it hit me like a punch to the gut. I was standing in my own kitchen, in my own house, holding my own wife's phone, and I'd just heard another man tell her he loved her. The American dream had just turned into the American nightmare, complete with a soundtrack of my own heartbeat drowning out the hum of the refrigerator. You know what they say about sleeping dogs? Well, whoever came up with that brilliant piece of wisdom clearly never had their entire world flipped upside down by a phone call. Because let me tell you, when you suspect your wife is cheating on you with your own flesh and blood, sleep becomes about as elusive as finding a decent pizza in a gas station. That night, I lay in bed next to Sarah like I was sharing a mattress with a complete stranger, listening to her breathe and wondering how long this had been going on right under my nose. She slept like a baby, the kind of peaceful, guilt-free slumber that apparently comes with being a world-class actress. Meanwhile, I was staring at the ceiling like it held the answers to life's greatest mysteries, my mind running through scenarios that would make a soap opera writer jealous. Every little sound she made, every shift in her breathing, every unconscious movement had me analyzing like I was some kind of bedroom detective. When morning finally crawled around, and trust me, it took its sweet time, I decided to channel my inner Sherlock Holmes. Not the brilliant deduction part, mind you, but the obsessive investigation part. If Sarah was playing games, then two could play that particular sport. Time to test the waters and see just how deep this deception went. I started small, like a fisherman testing the current before casting the big line. Over coffee and toast that tasted like cardboard mixed with betrayal, I threw out some casual questions. You know, the kind of innocent spousal interrogation that happens in kitchens across America every morning. Except usually it's about who forgot to take out the trash, not who's sleeping with the enemy. So what's your day looking like? I asked, watching her face over my coffee mug like I was studying for a final exam in advanced bullshit detection. She rattled off her usual routine: work, grocery store, again, because apparently we were always one banana away from starvation, maybe lunch with her sister. All delivered with the kind of casual confidence that made me wonder if she'd been practicing in the mirror. Her eyes never quite met mine, though. That was new. Sarah had always been the type to maintain eye contact during conversations, Even when she was telling me about her day at the DMV or describing some reality TV drama I couldn't care less about. Lunch with Jennifer? I pressed, naming her sister like I was testing a theory. Haven't seen her in a while. How's she doing with the divorce? Oh, you know Jen, Sarah said with a laugh that sounded just a fraction too forced. Still trying to decide if she wants to take Derek for everything he's worth or just half of everything he's worth. She was good. I'll give her that. The response was perfectly Sarah, complete with the kind of casual sister gossip that usually made my eyes glaze over. But there was something off about the timing, like she'd paused for just a millisecond too long before answering. Or maybe I was becoming one of those paranoid husbands who sees conspiracy theories in their wife's breakfast choices. Throughout the day, I found myself becoming the kind of guy I used to make fun of, checking her location on the Find My Friends app like some kind of digital stalker, noting when she was online versus when she said she was in meetings, mentally cataloging every detail that seemed even slightly out of place. It was exhausting and pathetic and necessary all at the same time. The real test came that evening when our 6-year-old daughter Chloe was at the kitchen table, tongue sticking out in concentration as she worked on her math homework. Addition and subtraction problems that seemed laughably simple compared to the emotional calculus I was trying to figure out in my own head. There's something beautifully innocent about watching a kid struggle with what's 7 plus 5. When you're sitting there trying to solve, what's marriage plus betrayal divided by family dysfunction? Sarah's phone buzzed on the counter, the same counter where it had delivered yesterday's bombshell. This time, though, I was ready. I watched Sarah's reaction like a hawk studying a mouse, looking for any telltale signs of guilt or excitement or whatever emotion people feel when their secret lover sends them a text. She glanced at the phone, and for just a split second, I swear I saw something flicker across her face. Not quite a smile, not quite relief, but something. Then she looked at me, caught me watching her, and that something vanished faster than free samples at Costco. Work, she said, holding up the phone like it was evidence in her defense. Steve wants to know if I can cover the morning shift tomorrow. Steve was her manager, a guy in his 50s who wore polo shirts tucked into khakis and talked about golf like it was a religion. The most exciting thing Steve had probably ever done was order the spicy mustard instead of regular. If Steve was texting Sarah at 8 o'clock at night about shift coverage, then I was the Queen of England. On a Tuesday night, I asked, keeping my voice casual while my internal BS detector started shrieking like a smoke alarm. That's late for Steve to be thinking about scheduling. Sarah's response was a perfect example of what I was starting to recognize as her new normal. Just plausible enough to be believable, just vague enough to avoid details that could be checked later. You know how he is about planning ahead, she said with an eye roll that would have won her an Emmy if this was a performance. Plus, Janet called in sick, and he's probably panicking about coverage. She texted back quickly, her fingers moving across the screen with the kind of practiced efficiency that comes from frequent use. Then she set the phone face down on the counter, another new habit I'd started noticing. The old Sarah used to leave her phone face up, screen visible, like she had nothing to hide. This new Sarah treated her phone like it was classified government documents. Mommy, can you help me with this one? Chloe's voice cut through the tension like a knife through butter, reminding me that in the middle of this adult disaster, there was still a little girl who needed help with homework and bedtime stories and all the normal parent stuff that keeps the world spinning. Sarah immediately shifted into mom mode, all warmth and patience as she helped Chloe work through a particularly tricky subtraction problem. Watching them together, Sarah's genuine smile as she praised Chloe for getting the right answer, Chloe's giggle when Sarah made a joke about numbers being sneaky, made my chest ache in ways I couldn't describe. This was my family. These were the people I'd built my whole adult life around. And somewhere in the middle of homework help and bedtime routines, the foundation had started cracking without me noticing. The worst part was watching Sarah slip seamlessly between roles, devoted mother 1 minute, potential cheating wife the next, all while maintaining the kind of performance that would make Broadway stars jealous. They say the devil's in the details, but whoever came up with that gem clearly never went through their cheating wife's personal belongings while she was belting out show tunes in the shower. Because let me tell you, the devil isn't just in the details. He's practically running a damn headquarters operation complete with receipts, bank statements, and enough evidence to make a divorce attorney's eyes light up like slot machines hitting jackpot. The next morning started like every other morning in our picture-perfect suburban life. Sarah hummed while making coffee. Actual humming. Like some kind of Disney princess who'd just discovered woodland creatures could do her hair. She kissed me goodbye with the same lips that had probably been whispering sweet nothings to someone else, grabbed her purse, and headed off to what she claimed was work, but could have been a CIA black ops site for all I knew at this point. The sound of her car pulling out of the driveway was my starting gun. I'd never been the snooping type. Hell, I used to make fun of those paranoid husbands on TV who went through their wives' stuff like amateur forensic investigators. But life has a funny way of turning you into exactly the kind of person you used to mock, usually right around the time your world implodes like a controlled demolition. I started with her purse, which she'd left sitting on the kitchen counter like some kind of leather landmine. Sarah's purse was legendary in our household. A black hole of receipts, expired coupons, lip balms, and enough random crap to stock a convenience store. Chloe used to joke that Mom's purse was bigger than her backpack, and she wasn't wrong. Digging through it felt like archaeological excavation, except instead of discovering ancient civilizations, I was uncovering evidence of modern betrayal. Receipt after receipt, all neatly folded and stuffed into various compartments like she was keeping records for the IRS. But these weren't receipts for groceries or gas or the usual domestic expenses that married couples rack up, like participation trophies. No, these were receipts for places I'd never been, restaurants I'd never heard of, located in parts of town that might as well have been on Mars for all the time I'd spent there. High-end places too, the kind of joints where appetizers cost more than our usual dinner for four, and the waiters probably have graduate degrees in wine pairing. La Bernardine. I read off one receipt, trying to pronounce it like I hadn't failed high school French. $67 for lunch. $67 for lunch. I could feed my family for 2 days on $67, and Sarah was dropping that kind of cash on what the receipt described as pan-seared halibut with truffle risotto. The same woman who complained when I suggested we splurge on name-brand cereal was apparently living it up like some kind of Food Network celebrity. But that was just the appetizer, pun intended. The main course came when I found the hotel receipts tucked away in a side pocket like dirty little secrets. Not just any hotels either, but boutique places downtown with names like the Metropolitan and Harbor View Suites. Places that charge by the hour what we spend on groceries by the week. My hands started shaking as I read the dates. Business trips that I remembered her taking, overnight conferences that had seemed perfectly legitimate at the time. Except now I was looking at evidence that these conferences involved room service champagne and Egyptian cotton sheets instead of PowerPoint presentations and continental breakfasts. The kicker? Some of these receipts were signed by someone else. Not Sarah's neat, careful signature that I'd seen on birthday cards and mortgage documents, but a man's handwriting. Sloppy, confident strokes that spelled out a name I recognized from family Christmas cards and wedding invitations. Marcus, my own goddamn brother. Seeing his name on those receipts was like getting punched in the gut by reality wearing brass knuckles. This wasn't some stranger sweeping my wife off her feet with romantic dinners and luxury hotels. This was my brother, the same guy who used to give me wedgies and steal my lunch money, who'd borrowed $5,000 from me last year to get back on his feet after his own divorce. I moved on to her dresser, rifling through drawers that used to be off limits not because they were forbidden, but because they were boring. Underwear, socks, the usual collection of female necessities that I'd never paid attention to because, frankly, my wife's sock drawer wasn't exactly riveting entertainment. But now everything was evidence. I found a jewelry box tucked away behind her winter sweaters. Not the jewelry box that sat on top of the dresser with the rings and necklaces I'd given her over the years, but a smaller one, hidden away like contraband. Inside was a bracelet I'd never seen before, delicate and expensive looking, with a charm that had an inscription too small to read without squinting. M+S forever. M+S. Marcus plus Sarah. Forever. I wanted to throw the damn thing across the room, but instead I just sat there on the edge of our bed. The bed we'd picked out together, the bed where we'd conceived our daughter, the bed where we'd had countless conversations about our future, holding evidence of my wife's affair with my brother like it was radioactive waste. The financial records were stored in a filing cabinet in what Sarah optimistically called our home office, but was really just a spare bedroom with a desk and a computer that we used to pay bills and store Christmas decorations. Sarah was meticulous about record keeping, a trait I'd always appreciated during tax season, but now made my investigation embarrassingly easy. Bank statements going back months told a story that made my chest tighten with each page. Regular withdrawals, always in cash, always in amounts that wouldn't trigger any automatic alerts but were too large to be lunch money. Monthly transfers to an account I didn't recognize, labeled simply as personal expenses in Sarah's neat handwriting. But the real smoking gun was buried in a folder marked miscellaneous, because apparently that's where you file evidence of your secret life. Transfer records to an account under Marcus's name. Not loans, not gifts, but regular payments with memo lines that made my blood run cold. Hotel expenses, dinner reimbursement, weekend getaway. My wife wasn't just having an affair with my brother. She was financing it. Using our joint savings, money we'd set aside for Chloe's college fund and family vacations, to pay for romantic rendezvous with the man who'd stood up at our wedding and toasted our eternal happiness. You know that moment in horror movies when the protagonist knows they should run, but instead they creep deeper into the haunted house. Well, turns out real life has its own version of that scenario, except instead of ghosts and demons, you're dealing with text messages and phone logs that are about to destroy everything you thought you knew about your marriage. And just like those movie characters, I knew I should stop digging, should preserve what little sanity I had left, but I couldn't help myself. I needed to see how deep this rabbit hole went, even if it led straight to hell. Finding the paper trail had been like discovering the tip of an iceberg. Impressive and damaging, sure, but I had this sinking feeling that the real wreckage was still hidden beneath the surface. The smoking gun, the absolute proof that would turn my suspicions from paranoid husband territory into cold, hard, divorce court-ready evidence, was sitting right there in Sarah's phone. The same phone that had started this whole nightmare, now taunting me from the kitchen counter like some kind of digital Pandora's box. The opportunity came when Sarah announced she was taking a shower. One of those luxurious, 20-minute affairs that involved enough steam to rival a sauna and more beauty products than a department store cosmetics counter. She'd left her phone charging on the nightstand, face down as usual, like it was trying to hide from me. My heart was pounding like I was about to defuse a bomb instead of just checking my wife's text messages. Funny how betrayal turns you into a criminal in your own home, skulking around like some kind of domestic spy while your daughter watches cartoons downstairs and your wife scrubs away whatever guilt she might actually feel about destroying your family. I picked up the phone with hands that were shaking worse than a paint mixer at Home Depot. Sarah had never been big on security. Her passcode was Chloe's birthday, because apparently she thought potential phone thieves wouldn't be able to guess that the woman with family photos plastered all over her lock screen might use her kid's birth date as a password. Under normal circumstances, her trusting nature was one of the things I loved about her. Right now, it was making my investigation easier than it had any right to be. The phone unlocked on the first try, and I was immediately hit with a wallop of notifications that made my stomach drop like a stone thrown off a bridge. Missed calls, unread texts, voicemails, all from numbers I didn't recognize and some that I did. But it was the messaging app that really caught my attention, showing preview texts that made my blood run cold even in their truncated form. Can't wait to see you again. Last night was incredible. When can we? I opened the Messages app like I was handling live explosives, half expecting the phone to burst into flames or start screaming accusations at me. What I found was worse than anything I'd imagined during my sleepless night of paranoid speculation. Deleted conversations. Lots of them. Sarah had been cleaning house, wiping away evidence like she was some kind of digital janitor. But here's the thing about technology. It's both a blessing and a curse. Sure, she could delete the conversations, but she couldn't delete the fact that they'd existed in the first place. The phone kept records, little breadcrumbs of digital infidelity that painted a picture clearer than any Renaissance masterpiece. Thread after thread of deleted conversations, all with the same contact. No name, just a number, but a number I was starting to recognize from all those missed calls and hotel receipts. The timestamps told their own story: late-night texts when I was sleeping next to her, afternoon messages sent during her lunch breaks, early morning exchanges that happened while I was making coffee and packing Chloe's school lunch. But Sarah wasn't quite as tech-savvy as she thought she was, because buried in the drafts folder, that digital graveyard where unfinished thoughts go to die, I found the mother lode. Messages she'd typed but never sent, like a diary of her affair written in real time. I can't keep lying to him like this. What if he finds out about us? I feel terrible, but I can't stop. And then, the one that made my knees weak and my vision blur around the edges. Marcus, I think I'm falling in love with you. Marcus. There it was, spelled out in black and white. No room for interpretation or wishful thinking. Not some random coworker or mysterious stranger, but my own brother. The man who'd taught Chloe how to ride a bike, who'd helped me install our deck last summer, who'd been coming to our house for Sunday dinners and holiday celebrations while secretly planning to blow up my life from the inside. I kept scrolling through the drafts like some kind of masochist, finding message after message that she'd typed but apparently thought better of sending. Plans for weekend getaways, complaints about having to pretend when I was around, discussions about when they could finally be together without hiding. The worst part wasn't even the content of the messages, it was the timestamps. This had been going on for months. Not a recent fling or a moment of weakness, but a sustained, calculated betrayal that had been happening right under my nose while I was worrying about mortgage payments and whether we needed to refinance the house. Every family dinner where Marcus had sat at my table, every time he'd hugged Sarah goodbye a little too long, every occasion where I'd thought they were just being friendly siblings-in-law, it had all been a performance. They'd been laughing at me, probably. Poor stupid husband who couldn't see what was happening in his own house, with his own wife, with his own brother. The sound of the shower turning off upstairs made me jump like I'd been caught robbing a bank. I quickly closed the messages and put the phone back exactly where I'd found it, face down on the nightstand like a guilty secret keeping watch over our bed. By the time Sarah emerged from the bathroom, wrapped in the fluffy robe I'd bought her last Christmas, I was back downstairs pretending to read the morning paper. But the words on the page might as well have been written in ancient Greek, because all I could see were those deleted messages, those drafted confessions, those digital love letters to my own damn brother. Feel better? I asked when she came into the kitchen, and the irony of the question wasn't lost on me. Here I was, asking if she felt better after her shower, when what I really wanted to know was how she managed to live with herself after what I'd just discovered. Much, she said, kissing the top of my head like she was still the loving wife instead of a woman who'd been financing secret romantic getaways with my brother. You seem tense. Everything okay? Everything okay? Right. My wife was having an affair with my brother, using our savings to pay for their romantic escapades, and lying to my face with the kind of skill that would make professional con artists jealous. But sure, everything was just peachy. You ever watch one of those nature documentaries where they show predators stalking their prey? The way the lion crouches in the tall grass, muscles coiled and ready, while the unsuspecting gazelle just keeps grazing like it's living in some Disney movie where everyone gets along and nobody gets eaten. Well, that evening I felt like I was watching the human version of that exact scenario, except I couldn't tell who was the predator and who was dinner. Because there I was, sitting at my own kitchen table, when Marcus walked through my front door like he owned the place. Same cocky grin he'd worn since we were kids, same casual wave, same, hey bro, greeting that used to make me smile, but now made me want to introduce his face to my fist. He was carrying a bottle of wine, some fancy red that probably cost more than my weekly grocery budget, and wearing that ridiculous polo shirt that made him look like he was about to tee off at the country club instead of having dinner with the family he was systematically destroying. The audacity was breathtaking, really. Here was a guy who'd been sleeping with my wife, spending my money, and planning a future that didn't include me, and he had the balls to show up at my house with wine and small talk like he was some kind of beloved family member instead of a backstabbing snake in khakis. Sarah, he called out, like he was announcing his arrival to his girlfriend instead of his brother's wife. I brought that Cabernet you mentioned, the one from that little winery the one I heard you talking about. Nice save, Romeo. Real smooth. If I hadn't already seen the evidence, that little slip might have flown right over my head. But now I was listening to everything with the intensity of a FBI wiretap, cataloging every word, every glance, every microscopic interaction that proved what I already knew but wasn't ready to confront yet. Sarah practically floated into the room when she heard his voice, and watching them greet each other was like witnessing a masterclass in acting. The casual hug that lasted just a fraction too long, the way her hand lingered on his arm when she thanked him for the wine, the shared look that passed between them for maybe half a second before they remembered I was standing right there, watching this performance like the world's most uncomfortable audience of one. You didn't have to bring wine, Sarah said, but her tone suggested she was pleased he had. I made that roast you love so much. The roast he loves. Not the roast we all love, or the roast that's good for family dinners. The roast he loves. Because apparently Sarah had been taking requests from her lover and serving them up at family dinner like some kind of twisted room service. Smells incredible, Marcus said, taking a deep breath like he was savoring more than just the aroma of pot roast. You always did know your way around the kitchen. Always did. Like he'd been sampling her cooking in contexts that didn't involve family gatherings. Like he'd been getting private tastings that came with more than just dinner rolls and small talk. Meanwhile, Chloe was at the table with her coloring book, completely oblivious to the adult drama unfolding around her. She was working on some elaborate masterpiece involving unicorns and rainbows, humming under her breath the way kids do when they're completely absorbed in something that makes perfect sense to them and no sense to anyone else. Watching her color while her mother and uncle performed their little charade made my chest tight with a kind of protective rage I'd never experienced before. This was my daughter's world they were playing with. Her sense of normal, her understanding of family, her belief that the adults in her life were trustworthy and stable and not secretly destroying everything she thought she could count on. She looked up at Marcus with the same adoration she'd always had for her fun uncle, the guy who brought her presents and taught her card tricks and made her laugh until she got the hiccups. Uncle Marcus, she squealed, abandoning her crayons to run over for a hug. Look what I drew. It's a unicorn flying over a castle. Marcus scooped her up like he was auditioning for Father of the Year instead of Homewrecker of the Century, spinning her around while she giggled and showed off her artwork. He praised her drawing with the kind of enthusiasm that would have seemed genuine if I didn't know he was a lying, cheating piece of garbage who was currently destroying her family from the inside out. That's amazing, kiddo, he said, setting her down and examining the drawing like it was headed for the Louvre. You're getting so good at staying in the lines. Pretty soon you'll be better than all those famous artists. Chloe beamed with pride, and I wanted to grab her and run. Just pick up my daughter and get her as far away from this toxic performance as possible, somewhere she wouldn't have to find out that Uncle Marcus was the reason Mommy and Daddy were going to get divorced. Somewhere she could keep believing that families stayed together and adults told the truth and unicorns were the most complicated thing she'd have to worry about. Dinner was a special kind of torture that should probably be studied by psychologists as a new form of enhanced interrogation. There we all were, sitting around the table like some Norman Rockwell painting of American family values, while I tried not to choke on my food and my rage simultaneously. Sarah served the meal with the kind of domestic pride that would have been sweet if it wasn't all part of her elaborate deception. Marcus complimented everything from the seasoning on the roast to the way she'd arranged the vegetables, and Sarah glowed under his praise like a teenager with her first crush. I sat there cutting my meat and plotting various scenarios that ranged from confronting them both right there at the dinner table to quietly documenting everything for the inevitable custody battle. The silence from my end of the table was apparently noticeable because Chloe kept asking me if I was okay and why I wasn't talking much. Daddy's just tired, sweetheart, Sarah explained, reaching over to pat my hand in what probably looked like wifely concern but felt like a patronizing dismissal. He's been working really hard lately. Working hard. Right. While I'd been working hard to provide for our family, she'd been working hard to betray it. The irony was so thick you could cut it with the same knife I was currently gripping a little too tightly. There's something about putting a 6-year-old to bed that makes you realize how fragile innocence really is. Chloe's bedtime routine was sacred in our house. The same sequence of teeth brushing, pajama selection, and story time that had been our nightly ritual since she was old enough to have opinions about which stuffed animals needed to sleep on the bed versus which ones could handle floor duty. That night, as I read her Goodnight Moon, for probably the 1000th time, her little hand curled in mine. I felt like I was saying goodbye to more than just another day. She fell asleep to the sound of my voice telling her about the quiet old lady whispering hush, completely unaware that downstairs, her mother was probably whispering entirely different things to her uncle. The thought made my stomach churn as I kissed her forehead and turned off her night light, leaving her to dream about whatever 6-year-olds dream about, probably unicorns and ice cream, and a world where the adults in her life don't lie to each other with the skill of professional con artists. When I came back downstairs, Marcus had finally left, thank God, because I'm not sure I could have maintained my composure much longer. The guy had spent the entire evening acting like he was doing me some kind of favor by gracing us with his presence, telling stories and cracking jokes, and playing the role of beloved family member, while I sat there knowing he'd been playing an entirely different role when I wasn't around. Sarah was in the kitchen loading the dishwasher, humming the same tune she'd been humming all week, probably some song he'd introduced her to during one of their romantic rendezvous. The sight of her there, looking so domestic and innocent, made something inside me finally snap. All the evidence, all the lies, all the late-night phone calls and secret bank transfers and deleted text messages, it all came rushing back like a dam bursting. I cornered her between the kitchen island and the sink, not physically threatening, but definitely blocking any easy escape routes she might have been considering. The fluorescent light above the sink cast harsh shadows across her face, making her look like a stranger, which, I was beginning to realize, she basically was. "We need to talk," I said, and even to my own ears, my voice sounded different. Colder, like someone had replaced my usual tone with something that belonged in a courtroom or a police interrogation room. Sarah looked up from the plate she was rinsing, and for just a moment, I saw something flicker across her face. Not surprise exactly, but the kind of wariness that comes when you know you've been caught, but you're not sure how much the other person knows. "Sure," she said, trying to sound casual while her hands kept moving dishes around like she was rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic. "What's on your mind?" "What's on my mind? Jesus, where did I even start?" The phone call that had started this whole nightmare? The hotel receipts with my brother's signature? The bank transfers funding their romantic getaways? The deleted text messages declaring her love for the man who'd stood up at our wedding? "Yesterday," I said, watching her face like I was studying a map to buried treasure, "when you were at the store, your phone rang." The plate in her hand slipped just slightly, barely noticeable unless you were watching for exactly that kind of tell. She recovered quickly, setting it in the dishwasher with the kind of careful precision that screamed guilt louder than any confession. "Oh," she said, and the single word was so loaded with false innocence it should have come with a warning label. "Who was it?" "That's what I'm hoping you can tell me," I said, stepping closer. Close enough to see the tiny muscle in her jaw twitching, close enough to smell the perfume she'd started wearing recently. Something expensive and unfamiliar that definitely hadn't come from the drugstore where she usually bought her beauty supplies. I answered it. I continued, letting each word drop like stones into still water. "Someone called looking for you." "A man." Sarah's face went through a series of micro-expressions that would have been fascinating to watch under different circumstances. Confusion, then recognition, then something that looked almost like relief before settling on indignation. The default emotion of people who've been caught red-handed but are going to try to brazen their way out of it anyway. "You answered my phone," she said, and the way she said it, you'd think I'd committed some kind of cardinal sin instead of just picking up a ringing device in my own kitchen. That's a violation of privacy." Privacy? The woman who'd been financing secret affairs with our joint bank account wanted to lecture me about privacy. The irony was so thick you could practically taste it. "Privacy," I repeated, letting the word hang in the air between us like a bad smell. "That's interesting. You want to talk about privacy while some guy is calling you about your underwear?" Her face flushed red, then drained white, then flushed red again like she couldn't decide which shade of guilt worked best with her complexion. She opened her mouth, probably to launch into some elaborate explanation involving wrong numbers and mistaken identity, but I cut her off before she could spin another web of bullshit. "He said he loved you, Sarah." Those were his exact words. "I love you so much." And you know what? I recognized his voice. That's when her whole performance finally cracked. The indignation crumbled, the false confusion evaporated, and what was left was just my wife, the woman I'd promised to love and cherish and protect, looking at me with the kind of trapped animal expression that comes when you realize the jig is finally up. "It's not what you think," she said, which has to be the most predictable line in the history of marital confrontations. Right up there with "we're just friends," and "it didn't mean anything." "Then tell me what it is," I said, leaning against the counter with my arms crossed, trying to look casual while my heart hammered against my ribs like it was trying to escape. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like my wife is having an affair, and the man she's having it with sounds suspiciously familiar. Sarah's eyes darted around the kitchen like she was looking for backup that wasn't coming. Her hands were shaking as she closed the dishwasher, and I could practically see the wheels turning in her head as she tried to figure out how much I actually knew versus how much I was guessing. "I never meant for this to happen," she finally whispered, and those 6 words confirmed everything I'd suspected but had been desperately hoping was wrong. The silence that followed was deafening. Not the comfortable quiet of a married couple who didn't need words to communicate, but the heavy, suffocating silence of a relationship breathing its last breath. And in that silence, I said the name I'd been dreading to say out loud. "Marcus, have you ever driven somewhere while so pissed off that you can't remember actually getting in the car, starting the engine, or navigating through traffic?" That's exactly what happened the next day after I dropped Chloe off at school and told Sarah I had some errands to run. Errands. Right. If confronting your backstabbing brother about screwing your wife counts as an errand, then sure, I was just running errands like some suburban dad picking up dry cleaning and groceries. The drive to Marcus's apartment complex gave me way too much time to think, which was about as helpful as gasoline at a bonfire. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so tight I'm surprised I didn't leave permanent fingerprints in the leather, and every red light felt like the universe was giving me more time to imagine exactly what I was going to say to the man who'd spent months systematically destroying my marriage while pretending to be my loving brother. Marcus lived in one of those trendy downtown lofts that cost more per month than most people's mortgage payments. The kind of place that screams, "I'm a bachelor with disposable income and questionable life choices." All exposed brick and floor-to-ceiling windows, probably filled with furniture that cost more than my car and had names like Barcelona chair or mid-century modern something or other. The perfect bachelor pad for a guy who apparently specialized in seducing his brother's wife with fancy dinners and expensive hotels. I'd been to his place maybe 3 times since he'd moved there after his own divorce last year. Sarah had always made comments about how stylish it was, how sophisticated Marcus had become, how different it was from our suburban house, with its family-friendly furniture and Chloe's toys scattered around like colorful landmines. Now I realized those weren't just casual observations, they were comparisons. She'd been measuring our life against his, and apparently finding ours lacking. The building had one of those fancy intercom systems where you had to be buzzed up, but I'd watched Marcus punch in the code enough times to remember it. Because that's the thing about family. You pay attention to the little details, you trust people with access to your life. You assume that blood means something more than just shared DNA and childhood memories. You assume wrong, as it turns out. The elevator ride to the 8th floor felt like it took about 17 hours, giving me plenty of time to rehearse what I was going to say. I'd run through dozens of scenarios during the drive over, everything from calm, rational discussions to screaming matches that would probably get the cops called. But standing there in that expensive elevator, listening to jazz music that was probably supposed to be soothing but just made me want to punch something, I realized that no amount of mental preparation was going to make this conversation easier. Marcus's door was at the end of the hallway, behind one of those heavy wooden barriers that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. I stood there for a moment, fist raised to knock, wondering if there was any chance I was wrong about all of this. Maybe there was some explanation that didn't involve my brother betraying me in the most fundamental way possible. Maybe those text messages were fake, those hotel receipts were forgeries, and that phone call was some elaborate prank that had gotten way out of hand. But deep down, I knew better. The evidence was too overwhelming, too consistent, too fucking obvious once you knew what to look for. So I knocked on that door with all the enthusiasm of a man walking to his own execution. The door opened, and there was Marcus in all his traitorous glory. He was wearing one of those casual button-down shirts that probably cost more than my weekly grocery budget. The kind of outfit that says, "I'm successful and sophisticated," but really just screams, "I have terrible priorities and spend too much money trying to impress people." His hair was perfectly styled, his apartment smelled like expensive cologne, And he had that same cocky smile he'd been wearing since we were kids, the one that used to make me laugh, but now made me want to rearrange his face with my fist. "Hey bro," he said, like I was there for a social visit instead of to confront him about destroying my family. "This is a surprise. Come on in. Want a beer? I just got this craft brew from some microbrewery in Oregon that supposedly uses hops grown in volcanic soil or some shit like that. Craft beer. Of course. Because regular beer wasn't sophisticated enough for a man who was apparently sophisticated enough to steal his brother's wife, but not sophisticated enough to feel bad about it. I stepped into his apartment without saying a word, taking in the space that had probably been the setting for God knows how many romantic encounters with my wife. The living room looked like something out of a magazine. All clean lines and carefully placed accent pieces, with not a single family photo or personal touch that might suggest someone actually lived there instead of just posing for interior design photo shoots. "Nice place," I said, and even I could hear the edge in my voice. "Very intimate." Marcus was already heading toward his kitchen, probably to get those fancy beers he'd mentioned, but something in my tone must have registered because he stopped and turned around. For the first time since I'd arrived, he actually looked at me, really looked at me, and I saw his expression change from casual brotherly welcome to something that looked suspiciously like recognition. "You okay?" he asked, and there was just enough wariness in his voice to let me know that some part of him knew exactly why I was there. "You seem a little tense." Tense. Right. I was about as tense as a bowstring being pulled by the Incredible Hulk, and this asshole was going to stand there pretending he didn't know why. "I'm fine," I said, staying right where I was instead of following him deeper into his love nest. "Just wanted to have a conversation with my brother. You know, catch up on things. See what you've been up to lately." The fake smile on Marcus's face flickered like a TV with bad reception. He was smart enough to know that casual brotherly visits weren't really my style, especially not on a random Wednesday morning when I should have been at work. But he was also arrogant enough, or maybe just stupid enough, to think he could charm his way out of whatever this was. "Well, you know me," he said with that laugh I'd heard on Sarah's phone, the one that had started this whole nightmare. Same old Marcus. Working too much, dating too little, trying to figure out what the hell I'm doing with my life. Dating too little. Jesus Christ, the balls on this guy. He was standing there talking about his dating life, while he'd been systematically dating my wife for months. The sheer audacity was breathtaking in its scope. "Really?" I said, taking a step closer. "Because from what I hear, your dating life has been pretty active lately." That's when the mask finally started to slip. Marcus's casual smile froze in place like someone had hit the pause button on his performance, and I could practically see him running through possible responses in his head. Deny everything? Act confused? Double down on the innocent brother routine? "I don't know what you mean," he said, but his voice had lost that confident tone he'd been using since I walked in. Now he sounded like someone who was trying very hard to sound casual and failing spectacularly. "Sarah's phone rang yesterday," I said, watching his face like I was studying evidence at a crime scene. "While she was at the store?" I answered it. The color drained from Marcus's face so fast I thought he might actually faint. All that expensive styling and sophisticated posturing couldn't hide the look of a man who'd just realized he'd been caught with his hand in the cookie jar. Except instead of cookies, it was his brother's wife, and instead of a slapped wrist, he was looking at the complete destruction of what was left of our family. "Oh," he said, and that single syllable contained more guilt than a full confession. "Yeah," I said, taking another step closer. "Oh." Imagine my surprise when some guy started talking about my wife's underwear. Imagine my shock when that same guy said he loved her. And imagine my absolute fucking amazement when I realized the voice belonged to my own brother. Marcus didn't even try to deny it. Maybe he was too shocked, maybe he was too guilty, or maybe he was just too arrogant to think he needed to explain himself to me. Instead, he just stood there looking like a deer caught in headlights. If deer wore expensive shirts and lived in overpriced lofts and specialized in destroying their siblings' marriages. "I can explain," he finally said, which had to be the second most predictable response in the history of family betrayals, right after "it's not what you think." "Then explain," I said, crossing my arms and settling in for what was sure to be the performance of his lifetime. "Because I'm really curious to hear how you justify fucking my wife." The word hung in the air between us like a toxic cloud. I'd said it deliberately. choosing the crudest term I could think of because I wanted him to understand that this wasn't some romantic love story he could pretty up with flowery language and noble intentions. This was betrayal, plain and simple, and I wasn't going to let him dress it up as anything else. Marcus ran his hands through his perfectly styled hair, messing it up for probably the first time since I'd arrived. He looked around his apartment like he was seeing it for the first time, maybe finally understanding how it would look from my perspective, the setting for his affair with my wife, funded by money from our joint accounts. She needed someone, he said finally, and I almost laughed at the sheer weakness of his opening statement. You work all the time, and she was lonely, and things just happened. Things just happened. Like adultery was some kind of natural disaster that had struck without warning, instead of a deliberate choice made by two people who decided their own desires were more important than my family's stability. You know what they don't tell you about having your life systematically destroyed by the two people you trusted most? They don't mention that afterward, you have to keep functioning like a normal human being. You still have to go to work, pay bills, help your kid with homework, and pretend that your entire understanding of reality hasn't just been fed through a wood chipper and set on fire. It's like being expected to perform surgery while someone's hitting you in the head with a baseball bat, theoretically possible, but not exactly optimal conditions. The drive back from Marcus's apartment was a blur of rage, betrayal, and the kind of cold, calculating fury that comes when you realize you've been played by professionals. His pathetic excuses kept echoing in my head like a broken record. She needed someone. You work too much. We didn't mean to fall in love. Didn't mean to fall in love. Like love was some kind of accident that just happened when you weren't paying attention, instead of a choice made by two adults who decided that their feelings were more important than my family's stability. The really infuriating part was how he'd tried to make it sound noble, like he'd been doing Sarah some kind of favor by providing emotional support during her time of need. Emotional support. Right. I'm sure all those hotel receipts and expensive dinners were just part of his comprehensive counseling program. Dr. Marcus, specializing in adultery therapy with a minor in homewrecking. But here's the thing about betrayal. It doesn't just destroy your past, it poisons your future too. Every memory I had of family gatherings, holiday celebrations, and casual Sunday dinners was now contaminated with the knowledge of what had really been happening. All those times Marcus had complimented Sarah's cooking, all those occasions when they'd shared inside jokes I didn't understand, all those moments when I'd thought I was looking at normal family interactions, it was all performance. A goddamn Oscar-worthy performance that had been playing in my own house while I sat in the front row, applauding like an idiot. I made a detour on the way home, stopping at a copy shop that looked like it had been designed by someone who thought the height of interior decorating was fluorescent lighting and industrial carpet. The kind of place where people went to make flyers for garage sales and copy their tax documents, not to begin documenting the evidence that would eventually destroy their marriage. But life has a funny way of making ordinary places into the settings for extraordinary disasters. The clerk behind the counter was a kid who looked like he was maybe 19 and had probably never experienced anything more traumatic than running out of energy drinks. He helped me scan every receipt, every bank statement, every piece of evidence I collected, creating digital copies that I uploaded to a cloud storage account Sarah didn't know about. Because if there's one thing I'd learned from this whole experience, it's that people lie, people cheat, and people delete evidence. But digital backups are forever. Next stop was a law office in one of those glass towers downtown that make you feel like an ant even when you're not dealing with life-altering legal issues. The lawyer I'd found online specialized in divorce and family law, with the kind of credentials that cost serious money but promise serious results. Her name was Rebecca Chun, and her reviews suggested she had a particular talent for handling cases involving adultery and financial deception, which, as it turned out, was exactly the kind of expertise I needed. Rebecca's office was all polished wood and expensive leather, the kind of place designed to make you feel confident about spending your kid's college fund on legal fees. She was younger than I'd expected, probably in her early 40s, with the kind of sharp intelligence that suggested she'd eaten weaker lawyers for breakfast and was already thinking about lunch. "Tell me about your situation," she said, gesturing to the chair across from her desk while she pulled out a legal pad that looked like it had seen more drama than a daytime soap opera. So I told her everything. The phone call that had started it all, the evidence I'd found, The confrontation with Sarah, the meeting with Marcus. I laid out the whole sordid story like I was presenting evidence to a jury, watching Rebecca's expression shift from professional interest to something that looked almost like sympathy. "How long do you think this has been going on?" she asked, making notes in handwriting that was probably neater than most people's typed documents. "At least 6 months, based on the bank records," I said. "Maybe longer." They were pretty good at covering their tracks. "But not good enough," Rebecca said with the kind of smile that probably made opposing counsel nervous. "Financial records don't lie, and neither do phone logs. You've done excellent documentation work. Most people come in here with suspicions and hurt feelings. You're coming in with evidence." Evidence. It felt weird to hear my destroyed marriage described in such clinical terms, but I was learning that divorce law was all about proof and documentation and turning human disasters into billable hours. Rebecca explained the process: asset division, custody arrangements, spousal support calculations, with the kind of professional detachment that would have been comforting if she'd been talking about anyone else's life. "One thing I need to tell you," she said, leaning forward with the expression people use when they're about to deliver news you don't want to hear. "Washington is a no-fault divorce state. The adultery doesn't technically affect the legal proceedings, but the financial deception could be relevant to asset division. No fault, meaning it didn't legally matter that my wife had been cheating on me with my brother, using our money to finance their affair, and lying to my face for months. The law apparently considered adultery about as relevant as someone's preference in breakfast cereal. But the money, that was different. Spending marital assets on an affair was something the courts actually cared about. "We'll need to freeze the joint accounts," Rebecca continued. "And I'd recommend moving half the funds to an account in your name only. Legal, defensible, and it prevents further misuse of marital assets." Marital assets. That's what our life savings had become. Not the money we'd set aside for Chloe's education or family vacations, or the dream house we'd talked about buying someday, but marital assets to be divided and disputed and fought over in conference rooms that smelled like stale coffee and broken dreams. The next few days passed in a blur of legal preparations and emotional numbness. I opened new bank accounts, changed passwords on everything from our mortgage company to our streaming services, and began the process of untangling a life that had been woven together over 8 years of marriage. It's amazing how complicated it is to separate two lives that have been legally and financially joined. Every credit card, every insurance policy, every shared subscription becomes another thread to be cut. At home, the atmosphere was toxic enough to require hazmat suits. Sarah had moved into the guest bedroom to give us both space to think, which was probably the first honest thing she'd said in months. We maintained a veneer of civility around Chloe, but the silence between us was so heavy it felt like a physical presence in the house. Chloe, bless her innocent heart, kept asking why Mommy and Daddy seemed sad, why we weren't talking as much, why the house felt different. How do you explain to a 6-year-old that her mother had been cheating on her father with her uncle, using money meant for her college fund to pay for romantic getaways? How do you tell a child that the adults she trusts most in the world have been lying to everyone, including each other, for months? Sometimes grown-ups have problems they need to work through, I told her during one of our bedtime conversations, holding her small hand while she curled up with the stuffed elephant she'd had since she was 2. "But no matter what happens, Daddy loves you very much, and nothing will ever change that." "Are you and Mommy going to get divorced like Tommy's parents did?" she asked with the kind of direct honesty that only kids possess. The question hit me like a physical blow. Tommy was a kid in her class whose parents had split up earlier in the year, and Chloe had come home with lots of questions about why some mommies and daddies didn't live together anymore. At the time, Sarah and I had answered those questions together, explaining divorce in the kind of gentle, age-appropriate terms that made it sound like a mutual decision made by adults who still cared about each other but couldn't live together anymore. Now I was facing the possibility of having that same conversation about our own family. "I don't know, sweetheart," I said, because lying to her seemed wrong even if the truth was complicated. Sometimes marriages don't work out the way people hope they will. But if that happens, it doesn't mean Mommy and Daddy don't love you, and it doesn't mean anything is your fault. She nodded with the kind of solemn understanding that broke my heart. Kids are resilient, everyone says, but they shouldn't have to be. They shouldn't have to learn about adult failures and broken promises and the ways that people can hurt each other. They should get to believe in forever and trust that the adults in their lives have their shit together enough to provide stability and security. Meanwhile, Marcus kept calling. Not me. He was apparently smart enough to know that ship had sailed, but Sarah. I could hear her phone buzzing at all hours, see her checking messages when she thought I wasn't looking. The voicemails he left were masterpieces of self-justification and manipulation, each one saved automatically to the cloud storage where Rebecca could access them as evidence of ongoing contact. I know you're angry, one message said, but what we have is real. Don't let him make you feel guilty for finding happiness. Finding happiness, like destroying my family, was some kind of noble quest for personal fulfillment instead of a selfish betrayal that had collateral damage in the form of a 6-year-old girl who didn't deserve to have her world turned upside down by adult stupidity. Another message was more direct. I love you, Sarah. Whatever happens with him, that doesn't change. We can get through this together. Together. The word made my stomach churn because it confirmed what I'd suspected. This wasn't just an affair that was ending now that they'd been caught. This was a relationship, a future they were planning, a life they wanted to build on the smoking ruins of my marriage. You know that moment in movies when the protagonist finally has enough evidence to confront the villain, and they dramatically spread everything out on a table like they're presenting the case to a jury? Well, turns out real life has its own version of that scene, except instead of dramatic music and perfect lighting, you get the fluorescent buzz of your kitchen lights and the sound of your own heart hammering against your ribs like it's trying to escape before the shit hits the fan. I'd spent 3 days preparing for this moment, organizing every receipt, every bank statement, every call log, and every piece of evidence into neat little piles that told the complete story of my wife's betrayal. Rebecca had helped me create a timeline that read like a manual for how to destroy your marriage in 6 easy steps, complete with dates, dollar amounts, and enough documentation to make a forensic accountant weep with joy. Sarah was in the living room, curled up on the couch with a book she'd been pretending to read for the past hour. I say pretending because I'd watched her turn exactly 2 pages in 60 minutes, which either meant she was the world's slowest reader or her mind was somewhere else entirely. Probably planning her next romantic getaway with my brother, or figuring out how much of our joint savings she could transfer before I noticed. Chloe was at a sleepover at her friend Emma's house, which meant we could have this conversation without worrying about our daughter overhearing the kind of language that would make a sailor blush. I'd specifically arranged it that way, because some conversations require the kind of brutal honesty that 6-year-olds shouldn't have to witness. Sarah, I said, my voice carrying the weight of every sleepless night and every moment of betrayal I'd discovered over the past week. We need to talk. In the kitchen. Now. She looked up from her book with the expression of someone who'd been expecting this moment, but hoping it would never actually arrive. The kind of look you see on the faces of people who know they're about to be held accountable for their actions and aren't particularly thrilled about the prospect. Can it wait until after I finish this chapter? She asked, which was probably the most ridiculous stalling tactic in the history of marital confrontations. Like we were discussing dinner plans instead of the complete destruction of our marriage. No. I said, already heading toward the kitchen where I'd spent the afternoon arranging my evidence like some kind of domestic crime scene investigator. It really can't. By the time Sarah reluctantly made her way to the kitchen, I had everything spread out across our dining table like the world's most depressing buffet. Hotel receipts arranged chronologically, bank statements highlighted to show suspicious transfers, phone records with Marcus's number circled in red ink, and printouts of text message logs that painted a picture clearer than anything Picasso ever created. Sarah stopped in the doorway when she saw the display, her face going through a series of expressions that would have been comical under different circumstances. Shock, recognition, fear, and finally something that looked almost like relief, the expression of someone who'd been carrying a heavy secret and was almost grateful to finally put it down. Sit, I said, pulling out a chair on the opposite side of the table from where I'd been working. Not an invitation, but a command. The kind of tone I'd never used with her before, because our marriage had been built on respect and partnership and the assumption that we were on the same team. She sat, her eyes scanning the evidence spread out between us like she was looking at photographs from a crime scene. Which, in a way, she was. These were the receipts and records and documentation of every choice she'd made to prioritize her affair over our marriage. Every decision to spend our money on romantic dinners with my brother instead of our daughter's future. This is everything, I said, gesturing to the papers like a prosecutor presenting evidence to a jury. Every hotel, every dinner, every bank transfer, every phone call. The complete record of your affair with Marcus. Sarah's hands were shaking as she reached for one of the hotel receipts, holding it like it might burst into flames. Her signature was right there at the bottom, along with Marcus's, proof that they'd been signing in together like some kind of twisted romantic couple. "How long have you known?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Since the phone call," I said. "But I've been documenting everything since then. Did you know that adultery might not matter legally, but financial deception does? Did you know that spending marital assets on an affair is considered dissipation of assets and can affect property division?" She winced like I'd slapped her. Good. She should wince. She should feel uncomfortable talking about the legal implications of her choices, because those choices had legal implications that went far beyond hurt feelings and broken trust. "I never meant for it to go this far," she said, which had to be the third most predictable response in the history of marital betrayals. Right after, "It's not what you think, and we can work through this." "How far did you mean for it to go?" I asked, picking up one of the bank statements that showed a particularly large transfer to Marcus's account. "Was there a specific dollar amount where you planned to stop? A certain number of hotel rooms that would have been your limit?" "It's not about the money," Sarah said, which was exactly what I'd expected her to say and exactly the wrong thing to say, while sitting across from thousands of dollars in evidence that it was absolutely about the money. "Really?" I said, holding up a receipt from that fancy French restaurant where they'd apparently celebrated their 3-month anniversary. "Because according to this, you spent $237 on dinner. That's more than we usually spend on groceries for a week." "But it's not about the money." Sarah started crying then, the kind of tears that come when you realize you've been caught and there's no way to explain away the evidence. Not the gentle tears of someone who's genuinely sorry, but the frustrated tears of someone who's mad that their secret life has been exposed. "You don't understand," she said between sobs. "Marcus makes me feel alive again. He pays attention to me. He listens to me. He makes me feel like I'm more than just a wife and mother. More than just a wife and mother." The words hit me like a physical blow, because being a wife and mother used to be something she was proud of. We used to joke about being a boring suburban family with our minivan and our mortgage and our weekend trips to Target. When had that become something she wanted to escape from instead of something she wanted to protect? "So this is my fault?" I asked, leaning back in my chair and trying to process the idea that my wife's affair was somehow a result of my failures as a husband. "I work 50 hours a week to support this family. I come home and help with homework and bedtime stories and weekend chores. And somehow that's not enough attention." "You work all the time," she said, like my job was some kind of hobby instead of the thing that paid for our house and our cars and her expensive dinners with my brother. "When was the last time we went out to dinner? Just the two of us? When was the last time you surprised me with flowers or told me I looked beautiful?" The questions hung in the air like accusations, and I felt something inside me snap. Not my temper, something deeper. The part of me that had been trying to understand her perspective, to find some way to make sense of her choices, to figure out how we'd gotten to this point. "When was the last time you told me you loved me and actually meant it?" I shot back. "When was the last time you kissed me without thinking about him? When was the last time you looked at our daughter and thought about how your choices might affect her future?" Sarah's tears stopped abruptly, like I'd flipped a switch. Her face hardened into an expression I'd never seen before, defensive, angry, and completely unrepentant. "Don't bring Chloe into this," she said. "This is between us." "No," I said, standing up and walking around the table until I was looking down at her. "This stopped being just between us the moment you started spending her college fund on hotel rooms. This stopped being just between us the moment you decided that your happiness was more important than her stability." That's when my phone buzzed with a text message. Without thinking, I picked it up and glanced at the screen, expecting to see something from work or maybe a message from Emma's mom about the sleepover. Instead, it was from Marcus. A message that had obviously been meant for Sarah's phone, sent to mine by mistake in what had to be the most perfectly timed accident in the history of terrible timing. "I love you." No matter what happens with him tonight, that doesn't change. We'll figure this out together. I stared at the screen for a moment, then slowly turned it around so Sarah could see the message. Her face went white as she read the words, probably realizing that her lover had just provided the final nail in the coffin of any chance she might have had of salvaging our marriage. He sent this to the wrong number, I said, setting the phone down on the table next to all the other evidence. But I think the message is pretty clear. You two have been planning this confrontation, haven't you? You've been strategizing about how to handle me finding out. Sarah didn't deny it. She just sat there staring at the phone like it was a smoking gun, which it essentially was. The final piece of evidence that this wasn't just an affair that had gotten out of hand. It was a relationship, a future they were planning, a life they wanted to build together. I want you out, I said, the words coming from somewhere deep in my chest that I didn't even know existed. Tonight. Pack whatever you need for now, and I'll have the rest of your things sent wherever you want them. But I want you out of this house, away from our daughter, and out of my life. You can't kick me out, Sarah said, finally finding her voice again. This is my house too. Actually, I can, I said, pulling out the legal documents Rebecca had prepared for exactly this scenario. Temporary restraining order, based on financial abuse and emotional distress. You've got 2 hours to pack and leave, and then you're not allowed back without a court order. The look on Sarah's face when she saw the official letterhead was almost worth the pain of the past week. Almost. She realized that I hadn't been sitting around feeling sorry for myself. I'd been preparing, documenting, and building a case that would protect both me and Chloe from any further damage she might try to cause. Where am I supposed to go? She asked, like that was somehow my problem to solve. I don't know, I said, and for the first time in days, I felt something like peace. Maybe Marcus can figure that out. After all, he loves you so much.